And some breaking news this hour. A man has been sentenced over Facebook posts he made during the riots and violence seen across the country. And he's been jailed for stirring up racial hatred online. 28-year-old Jordan Parler has been sentenced to 20 months in prison. Meanwhile, 2 men have been sent to prison for an attack on what prosecutors described as pro-EDL protesters after rival demonstrations clashed in Leeds city centre last Saturday. Leeds Crown Court was shown CCTV of a large group of Asian men kicking and punching a smaller group of 4 white men. 21-year-old Samir Ali from Leeds and 31-year-old Adnan Ghafoor, who also lives in Leeds, admitted a fray earlier on this week. Well, it comes as the Prime Minister has issued a warning to those using social media to encourage violence and disorder. Visiting the Metropolitan Police Command Centre in central London, Sir Keir Starmer said social media is not a law-free zone. He said the police are actively pursuing those breaking the law online, with more swift sentences expected to be handed down today. He said it was a reminder to everyone that whether they're directly involved or remotely involved, those people are still culpable.
Those that are thinking about getting involved in disorder of any sort is very clear. If you involve yourself in disorder, then the full force of the law will be applied. And the fact that we've seen this week people not just in court but being sentenced to significant terms of custody for their behaviour just a few days ago, I think is a very important message to anyone who's thinking of getting involved in the coming days.
Several police forces have issued further CCTV appeals to identify suspects they believe to have been responsible for some of the violence and disorder seen. Detectives investigating riots in Merseyside issued images of 11 people after a separate appeal helped identify individuals earlier this week. Greater Manchester Police have issued a similar appeal for information. They're asking the public to contact them directly. Alternatively, they have said to contact Crime Stoppers anonymously if they recognise any of the people pictured there. Now, the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, has claimed he does not feel safe as an openly Muslim politician following the riots. Asked by reporters if he felt at risk during the riots given, he said, religion, he said, clearly I'm not safe, which is why I've got police protection. The mayor expressed alarm at recent events, comparing them to the racial tensions he faced growing up in the 1970s and the 1980s. To other news now, disgraced former BBC News presenter Hugh Edwards has been asked to return his salary by the corporation's board. It comes after the 62-year-old admitted in court last week to having indecent images of children. 7 of the 41 images were described as being in the most serious category of child abuse pictures and videos. The BBC's board has told him to repay his salary from the time he was arrested in November last year, saying the presenter undermined trust in the BBC and brought it into disrepute. Now, former US President Donald Trump has agreed to debate Vice President Kamala Harris on television in the race to the White House. It's been confirmed the Republican nominee will debate his Democratic rival on the 10th of September on the US network ABC. And Trump told a news conference at his Florida home last night that he also wants to add 2 more debates on Fox News and on NBC. During his news conference, Mr. Trump claimed his opponent wasn't intellectually up to the challenge. In other news, Russia's defence ministry has confirmed that reserve forces are being sent to the country's western Kursk region, where it still hasn't regained control after a cross-border offensive by Ukrainian troops. Moscow claims Ukraine lost more than 280 military personnel in the past 24 hours, a claim that has not been independently verified. Reports suggest that Ukrainian troops are operating more than 6 miles inside Russia, the deepest cross-border advance by Kyiv since Moscow launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine 2 years ago. And finally, former reality TV star Katie Price has appeared in court today after being arrested at Heathrow Airport last night. It comes after a judge issued a warrant following her failure to attend a High Court bankruptcy hearing last month. Price was declared bankrupt in November 2019 and then again in March this year. Ms Price is expected to attend a further hearing this month. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. It is back to Dawn.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much, Tatiana. Now, what should we start with? Oh, yeah, let's start with the riots, shall we? The crackdown on rioters have shamed Britain, and in the last few minutes, a man has been jailed for publishing written material intended to stir racial hatred. 28-year-old Jordan Parler from Leeds was sentenced to 20 months in prison. Meanwhile, former Labour councillor Ricky Jones has been charged with 1 count of encouraging violent disorder after he was filmed saying rioters are disgusting and should have their throats cut, complete with a symbol for doing so. Nice. GB News political editor Christopher Hope is joining me now in my little cosy studio. That's not cosy, it's quite cold actually, to explain where we are with the riots politically now. What's going on?
Well, 2 days of peace, Dawn, is what's happened, and that's good news for Sir Keir Starmer.
Yes.
He has shown, I think, the value of his background as a former Director of Public Prosecutions. He's pulled all the levers he knows to get the system working properly, and we know how often it doesn't work properly, frankly, on GB News. But we have got violence on the streets since those horrific killings of those 3 girls in Southport last Monday. And since then, you've seen people being arrested, charged and jailed days after it happened. That's often because of a guilty plea. But even so, I think that is serving to dampen down the rioting, and that's a good thing for everybody.
Of course.
The challenge for him, for Sir Keir Starmer, is what comes next. He's done really well, I think, to get this under control, I would argue, although some would definitely dispute him calling everyone far right who's concerned about immigration. That's not certainly where GB News viewers and listeners are. But what comes next is how to work out why people are so upset, why they're concerned about immigration. A lot of the blame is on the last government, because putting up migrants in hotels is hardly popular in many communities, and allowing so many to arrive here legally and not combating illegal migration was all on the Tory party. But now it's 5 weeks into this government, it's Labour's fault. Craig McKinley, former Tory MP, stood down in the last election, known to our viewers as the bionic MP, because he lost his arms and legs to sepsis. Welcome back in an emotional moment on the day the election was called. He's given an interview to me for our podcast at GB News called Chopper's Political Podcast, in which he talks...
Very good,
thank you, do tune in. But he talks... Thank you, Dawn. He talks there about why people are on the streets and talks about the fact that not everyone is far right. And here's what he had to say.
OK.
Following the riots since those dreadful killings in Southport last week, Craig McKinley, are you comfortable about the blame on the far right? A lot of viewers, listeners to GB News are concerned about the idea that the government's been willing to say it's just the far right. And that almost says if you're worried about immigration, it's a far right issue. And of course, as we know, it's a wider issue and a deeper issue than just one held by some thugs on the far right.
Well, I mean, if the far right are that good at organising things, then they're far better at organising things than any political party or government that I know in the UK. So I actually don't believe fully. I mean, there's always going to be some nutters, and they should be dealt with very robustly, and they should be in prison where appropriate. I'm fully in favour of all of that. But if you look at some of these, rallies that are going on, there are lots of couples on these rallies that you'd expect to go and see in the Dog and Duck on a Friday afternoon. These are normal people, and I think what happened with Southport, it's sort of culminated what I feel is a deep malaise in this country, a deep worry, and it sort of brought it together in an unexpected way. And I'm afraid that's how things often happen. You know, it's like the butterfly wings in Brazil create a storm in Africa. You know, this is almost one of those moments where I think a lot of people have said, forget what the Southport was actually all about. It actually made people rather annoyed about the state of Britain today. I mean, I was so upset about that Southport incident.
Craig McKinley, Lord McKinley, joining the House of Lords in October, so he's back in public life then. I should say he knows about the right of politics. He founded UKIP.
I've forgotten you mentioned. Yeah, you mentioned that just now. Yes.
He fought Nigel Farage for the seat in South Thanet in 2015. He knows about the right. He's not far right at all. He's not far right at all. But he knows how the right think about things, and that's why he's talking from a right-wing perspective. I should say that last night Cobra met for the third time over the riots. That's in the meeting in Cabinet Office Briefing Room A, it's called, Cobra. Sir Keir Starmer chaired the meeting. He said he wanted the police on a high alert this weekend because they are not out of the woods yet. They know that. And social media, as we heard earlier, is not a law-free zone. You can say things on Twitter, X, Facebook, and go to prison, as we're seeing today in Leeds. Also, a slight controversy is going to be the government's plans, I say slight, a big controversy, releasing prisoners early to ease overcrowding. You serve 40% of your jail term, not 50%, and you're released. That could include rioters, because so far the most any rioters have got has been 3 years, 30 months and 20 months, but 3 years. So anyone with a term of less than 4 years can be released early under the government's own plan starting next month. So this will be a long tail of debate about the riots.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions to be answered there. I think Craig had a very good point there. If you look at some of the sentencing, there were two lads, a couple they are, who were having a few beers and playing bingo all afternoon, and then just decided to go out. They're not politically motivated, are they? I mean, obviously
we don't know about their case.
But...
We don't know about their case. We don't know who they are. We don't know enough about their motivation, and we haven't followed their case closely. But his wider point he's making here, I think, is that people get caught up in things.
Yes,
they
exactly
want to
that.
express concern about things, and others are battling away. And often you are seeing some of the guilty pleas, some tears in the dock. Huge apologies from people being caught up in things they weren't meant to be. They just got on the wrong side of a police line. Maybe we don't know, again, about the detail of all these cases, but there's a general feeling that it's not necessarily a right-wing issue. And that's what was, I think, a misstep by Sir Keir Starmer, according to our viewers and listeners at GB News. They said it's not far right to be worried about immigration.
Of course it isn't. No one's condoning the writing in any way, shape or form.
Indeed. But
what I do notice with Sir Keir Starmer, he's very keen to engage with communities, to talk to communities about what the Labour government can do to help those communities. But he doesn't appear to be talking to what he has deemed, or the Labour Party have been deeming, the far right.
Indeed. I've been talking to people...
Or voters, as we call them.
I know people who've been with the Prime Minister and Angela Rayner on the visits up north, and they are spending a long time talking to communities. They are doing the kind of soft outreach, which they have to do as the government to bring communities together. But as part of that, I think it's recognising... without anywhere near justifying the violence, Dawn.
No, of course not.
Recognising the concern about immigration in this country, and it's not a far-right issue, is the point.
No, absolutely. So, I mean, obviously, we are in recess at the moment, aren't we?
Yeah.
Well, this is, as you say, the third Cobra meeting we've had. But Sir Keir Starmer was due to go on holiday, I think, this week, wasn't he? Is any sign of that?
Well, we were told we only get one moment to ask the government things in recess on the Monday morning lobby briefing. We were told last Monday that, as planned, he's here all week working at his desk. Now, the question is, can he go away next week? I mean, I think he needs a break. He's fought and won an election. He's set up a government from scratch. Yes. He's 5 weeks in. No one will begrudge him a holiday. Having said that, you're also in charge. And if he's pictured with his feet up on a sun lounger and it's kicking off again in Britain, in England, or wherever it is, that won't be a good look. And that's the problem of being in power, the burden of being in power,
Yeah, absolutely, the buck stops with you. I just want one question on Mayor Sadiq Khan, comments about not feeling safe as a Muslim in the capital city. How has that been received politically? Yeah,
well, and what he says matters. He is the Mayor of London. He oversees the Met Police. He's the boss, essentially, of Sir Mark Rowley, who's the Met Police chief. He has talked in the past about his security. He doesn't like to talk about it that much, but he has quite a wide range of security because of his high profile. But the most publicly Muslim politician we have in this country. He's worried about it. I mean, I think, frankly, I don't think you can begrudge him saying that.
No, of course not, no.
And he has said he's been triggered in that word by the far-right protests, and he is worried about it. But he does have... security. I think the fact he says he's not safe in London is maybe a testament to the wider issue of being safe in London. I mean, the fact if he feels that means that people who haven't got the security he's got, who are Muslim, will be feeling the same. Yeah, I mean, obviously, as someone who lives in London, I could mention well, you feel it. Knife crime and being a woman in London and feeling safe. But, I mean, obviously, that's a splitting hair. OK, just one final question. Labour and introducing a legislation about Islamophobia, making it almost an official definition. Yes. What can you explain a bit more about that? Well, we're not there yet. It's not defined in law what is Islamophobia. The Tory party didn't go there. They looked at it, they reviewed it. The party was accused of having problems with Islamophobia amongst its membership base. That was denied by the party, although other senior Tories did say they'd seen it and they're worried about it. We're not there yet, but the government is looking at defining Islamophobia, and that could mean that you have remarks made in public life about Muslim people which could fall foul of the law suddenly. So we'll see how that goes and how it's defined. We saw, didn't we, about the definition of anti-Semitism?
Yes, of course.
And would you accept the official international one or not? And did Jeremy Corbyn accept it or not back when he was Labour leader? So it's a whole complicated space. And I think we are going to see that defined by this government. And what that means for people talking about Islam on social media and Muslim people, we'll wait and see.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of work to be done.
It's controversial.
It is controversial.
But arguably, it needs to be done.
Well, something does, doesn't it? And there's a lot of work to be done. I wouldn't want to be in a sun lounge at the moment because you're just going to be stressed out all the time, aren't you? Thank you very much, Christopher Hope. Lovely chopper. Thank you. But the sentence we've been talking about, are they too harsh? We've seen in the last 20 minutes Jordan Parler was sentenced to 20 months in prison for what he wrote on Facebook, and Daniel Maguire was handed 2 years and 2 months in prison after spitting at police in Plymouth. I'm struggling with this as a woman on the grounds that sort of like sexual assault and rape in London, certainly under the Met Police, barely even, get prosecuted. I mean, no one really bothers, do they? So I'm curious as to find out what's going on with this sentencing. So joining me now is a criminal defence lawyer, Paul Britton. Paul, good to see you. Thank you very much for joining me this afternoon. Now, the obvious question that I want to ask is how comes... the justice system has been on its knees for a long time. Things take years to go through the courts. In particular, as a woman, I'm concerned about sex crime. Suddenly, overnight, we not only have prison cells, but we have judges sitting and people are guilty and in jail straight away. How is this happening?
I mean, it's not suddenly. It's right that these people are brought to justice, and the ones that we've seen coming before the courts have actually been in the system for a little bit longer than you'd ordinarily think. The public are watching. There is a doctrine in law that justice doesn't just have to be done, but it has to be seen to be done. And the government and the judiciary are under a lot of pressure to be reacting quickly to this, and that's why we are seeing that already in the news headlines. And I know you mentioned a few cases there where people have been sentenced, and I think you mentioned one was 20 months, and I don't know the details of that in particular, but when we sentence someone to fewer than 2 years, they can have what we call a suspended sentence, which means they don't go into jail, but if they reoffend in that period of time, they do go straight in. So we're probably not seeing those people taking up a prison cell. When it's over the 2 years, that's probably done deliberately because that individual has done something that warrants them going to jail, and the judiciary, or the judge in particular in any particular case, will want to see that person in jail for a set period of time. Of course, they can apply for parole once they're in, which might see them get out early. But these people aren't being convicted of under the Public Order Act of 86, and Section 1's quite helpful for rioting, and we are talking about rioting. And rioting is when 12 or more people come together for a common objective, whether that be political or to cause trouble, and cause an ordinary person of what we call reasonable firmness to feel alarm or harm and distress. If they're found guilty of that sort of offence, they're looking to up to 10 years, depending on many factors.
Paul, I know you said that, it's not happening as quickly as I think, but the riots haven't been going on for that long, and already we are seeing people going through the court straight away. I know you've tried to explain it, I still can't get my head around how it can happen so quickly when there's a will to do so.
But one of the points you were saying is that there's not prison cells available or prison places. But, in many cases, they are going to be sentenced to fewer than the 2 years. Is it happening quickly? People that are arrested for serious crimes that are affecting public order, and all of us as a majority, I mean, it's everywhere. It's from the south right up to the north. It's from the east to the west. They need to be dealt with in an expeditious way so that we are sending a clear message, because it's also prevention. Now, a murderer will be brought before the court quite quickly and they'll enter a plea. And if they say they're not guilty, then they'll have to determine whether they go out on bail or they're held in remand. That's because it's a serious crime. Put together, what is happening in our country right now is an incredibly serious crime, and the public at large are at risk.
OK, unfortunately, we're running out of time there. That's criminal defence lawyer Paul Britton. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. Thank you. Right, well, let me know what you think about that, because I'm still not entirely convinced that it's, you know, they can do it when they want to, can't they? So why don't they do it all the time? But we move on. Now, an Iraqi national has been arrested by police investigating a planned terror attack on a Taylor Swift concert in Austria. I'm Dawn Neeson, in for Martin Daubney. This is Britain's news channel. Put the kettle on, but don't go too far. See you soon.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Ellie Costello, and thank you so much for joining us here on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight. Every night from 11 p.m.
Bad news for Liberal mothers who want to score virtue points by transitioning their kids, Lewis.
You know, this
tell us what it is.
Is a California dad is granted full custody of 4-year-old son after boy's mom tried to raise the child non-binary.
It's almost like cult-like behaviour. You've got the mother transitioning and then the transitioning the son as well. It's interesting that, you know, it's almost like a religion. You get, you know, if you're a Christian, your kids are probably going to be Christian. If you're, you know, Hindu, your kids are probably going to be Hindu. And if you're transgender, your kids are probably going to be transgender.
There's absolutely a causation there. We see plenty of times in videos. This is exactly it. Like, and also we see the children of celebrities and people in particularly sort of liberal environments. It doesn't happen in some village in Indonesia or whatever. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, there's no such thing as a trans child. There's no such thing as non-binary. What there is are people with mental health issues and parents who want a virtual signal and also want to brainwash their children. This is an egregious example of that, where she was basically taking him to Disneyland, but he couldn't get on a ride unless he wore princess shoes. I mean, really evil, horrible stuff. You know, forced to wear a dress on his birthday. You know, just really nasty stuff. Now, here's the thing. You talk about the court going to him. No, that's not what happened. He took 800 pages of documentary evidence. He took 8 hours of police body camera footage showing this mental behaviour from the mother. And guess what? The courts ruled that the mum got him. They ruled against him. The only reason that he got custody of his child is because, thank God, a child protective services officer randomly got involved, looked into it themselves, and that's how he eventually got custody of the child. So the courts in America are utterly captured.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Tom Harwood. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Welcome back. I'm Dawn Neeson. This is GB News. I'm standing in for Martin Daubney. Now, the teenage suspects in a plot to carry out a terror attack at the now cancelled Taylor Swift concerts in Vienna were apparently planning to use knives and homemade explosive to kill as many people as possible. And you've seen who goes to Taylor Swift gigs, haven't you? They're little girls, their mums and dads. It's just, oh, God, any case. Now, but Taylor Swift is due here on Thursday, and her fans are worried that the gigs might not go ahead in London either. But that got us thinking, why target Taylor Swift's concert in particular? Is she a threat to Islamists? I mean, that's what we're going to ask. It's interesting that the supposed terrorist didn't choose to target the wrestling event the day before in the same venue. Could it be as similar to the bombing at, Ariana Grande's concert in Manchester? Remember, another feisty young woman? That was 7 years ago. Her audience, again, largely women and girls, sing along to songs that empower females. What on earth is going on here? Well, to answer that question, hopefully, is feminist Khadija Khan, who grew up a Muslim before she left the religion. Khadija, thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. Ariana Grande, Taylor Swift, what is it going on here?
We see a pattern here. As you just said, that who goes to these concerts? These are little girls. They are mothers of these little girls, young women. They go to these concerts. So as far as I see this whole situation, there are people who have been radicalized with Islamist ideology, and they have pledged allegiance to the terrorist group IS. And the same thing happened in Ariana Grande's concert when Salman Abedi, he targeted that area, the Manchester arena, and the IS took the responsibility for that incident. And here we see the person who planned to carry out this attack. He has also pledged allegiance to IS. So there is a pattern between these two incidents. We see that these attackers, they apparently aim to claim as many casualties as possible. And then there is a religious misogyny component to these incidents, because according to the radical interpretation of religion, women who dance, drink, and spend time at home, enjoy, with their friends, they deserve to be punished. And some radical and some extremist people, they take this responsibility on themselves, and they think that it's all justified punishing these women who are apparently, in their eyes, are not good enough to be respected and protected.
So, I mean, I'm struggling with this. I mean, as you've just said, Khadija, mostly little girls and quite a few gay men as well, in particular, certainly with Taylor Swift, big fan. What is it that radical Islam has an issue with young women out enjoying themselves?
Radical interpretation of Islam has problem with everything that we hold dear in the Western democracies. I mean, you talk about radicalization. So radicalization did not stop with the, demolition of IS as a group. The ideology lives on. We need to understand this thing. The radicalization of young people is very much reality of our lives. And as far as why they have problem with women who are independent and who they see as a threat to their authority. It's very obvious. There is a very clear concept of religious misogyny that seeks validation from religious discourse. So it's no wonder that we see these kind of attacks. And I want to say one thing, that it's been a long time we're talking about radicalization, and there are many mosques and seminaries have been reported in media for propagating, radical views, misogynistic views. Just recently, for Islamic charities, they are under investigation for promoting, for condoning, for hosting an extremist cleric from Pakistan who condones sexual slavery. And it is very important to mention that this person, this cleric, extremist cleric, he is notorious for promoting misogynistic views, and he does it on daily basis, not only in Pakistan. He has followers around the world. So we have a situation where mosques and seminaries, certain mosques and seminaries, they not only invite these foreign extreme radical clerics and provide them ample opportunities to propagate these vile and appalling views, which are antithetical to everything that Western democratic societies stand for.
Khadija, just briefly, we are running out of time. You're obviously a very bright, independent, young woman. What reaction have you had to when you come out and give interviews like this and talk about your views? I mean, have you been threatened?
It's not easy to live a normal life when you are criticizing Islam, and I think it's very much clear. There have been instances, and there have been evidences that people who criticize Islam, they face repercussions and consequences. And of course, it's not easy to just talk about radical aspects of a religion and then live a normal life. Then of course I've faced lots of discrimination and from very orthodox religious people, and yes, threats. It's a part of life.
I can imagine. Khadija, we've run out of time, unfortunately. I could talk to you for much, much longer. Thank you very much for speaking out so bravely and carry on doing what you do. Thank you very much. That's Khadija Khan, a journalist and broadcaster there. Now, gosh, I'm running out of time already. It's time for the latest news headlines with Tatiana Sanchez, and here she is.
Dawn, thank you. The top stories from the GB newsroom. Former Labour councillor Ricky Jones has been charged with encouraging violent disorder. It's after he was filmed addressing a crowd at a London demonstration on Wednesday evening, that coming from the Crown Prosecution Service. He's appearing at Westminster Magistrates Court this afternoon. A Facebook user who urged people to attack a Leeds hotel used to house asylum seekers has been jailed. 28-year-old Jordan Parler has been sentenced to 20 months after pleading guilty to publishing written material intended to stir racial hatred. Meanwhile, 2 men have been sent to prison for an attack on what prosecutors described as pro-EDL protests after rival demonstrations clashed in Leeds city centre last Saturday. Leeds Crown Court was shown CCTV footage of a large group of Asian men kicking and punching a smaller group of 4 white men. 21-year-old Samir Ali from Leeds and 31-year-old Adnan Ghaffur, who also lives in Leeds, admitted a fray earlier this week. It comes as the Prime Minister has issued a warning to those using social media to encourage violence and disorder. Visiting the Metropolitan Police Command Centre in central London, Sir Keir Starmer said social media is not a law-free zone. He said the police are actively pursuing those breaking the law online with more swift sentences. He said it was a reminder to everyone that whether they're directly involved or remotely involved, those people are still culpable. Disgraced former BBC News presenter Hugh Edwards has been asked to return his salary by the corporation's board. It comes after the 62-year-old admitted in court last week to having indecent images of children. 7 of the 41 images were described as being in the most serious category of child abuse pictures and videos. The BBC's board has told him to repay his salary from the time he was arrested in November last year, saying the presenter undermined trust in the BBC and brought it into disrepute. And in sport, Lee Carsley has been named as interim head coach of the England men's football squad ahead of the upcoming Nations League fixtures. Carsley will step up to replace Gareth Southgate, who brought his 8 years in charge to an end after defeat to Spain in the Euro 2024 final last month. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much, Tatiana. Now, loads of you are already getting in touch, and certainly after listening to Khadija Khan there talking about the threat of militant Islamists to women. Alan Evans says this lady will next to get locked up for criticising the religion. And Davey says, have we missed Keir Starmer, the UK Prime Minister, condemning Islamic attitudes towards women? It's militant Islam. It's not all Islam, is it? I mean, it's just militant Islam. But yeah, obviously, it's dangerous. So thank you very much, Khadija, for coming on and talking to that. Very brave. Now, if you want to get in touch, like everybody else is at the moment, really simple to do. Just go to gbnews.com/your say. And I promise I'm going to read out as many messages as I possibly can. I'm Dawn Neeson, this is GB News, and it's Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon. Here's your Met Office weather for GB News. Whilst there will be a bit of cloud, a bit of rain around at times tomorrow, it's looking sunnier and hotter for many on Sunday. But for the time being, it is still quite blustery out there, especially across northern parts. There's quite a pressure gradient with an area of low pressure to the north of the UK, and it's this that's driving some breezy conditions. Also, plenty of showers to end the day across parts of Scotland in particular, and some of them could be quite heavy, but rattling through quite quickly because of those brisk winds. Elsewhere, turning largely dry with some clear skies, especially towards the east overnight, but thicker cloud and a bit of rain pushing in from the west. In the west then, temperatures holding up mid to possibly high teens for some of us, a little bit fresher where we have some clearer skies further east. Now, taking a closer look, first thing tomorrow morning and across parts of Scotland, it will still be a bit breezy and there will again be some showers around, perhaps some longer spells of rain for a time, particularly across western Scotland, all of that drifting northeastwards. A few showers perhaps for parts of Northern Ireland and northwest England, a brighter picture for northeast England. Also down the eastern side of England, a good deal of fine sunny weather for some to begin with, but the outbreaks of rain, which could be heavy over the hills towards the west, gradually making their way eastwards as we go through the morning. So for many parts of England and Wales, it is going to be quite a grey day and there will be a bit of rain at times, though it shouldn't be too heavy for most of us. Further north, a slightly brighter picture, similar to today really, some blustery showers rattling through, though the wind's not quite as strong. In the north, temperatures getting into the high teens, low 20s, mid 20s for some of us towards the southeast. Later on tomorrow, we will start to see the cloud and any rain across England and Wales drifting away towards the east. So some clearer skies developing as we go through the night, and the showers in the north should start to die out as well. And then Sunday for most is looking fine with a decent amount of sunshine, with temperatures rising as we go into Monday. Bye-bye.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. In East Lothian, the A6093 is closed near Ormiston for repairs to a burst water main. On the M5 in Worcestershire, 2 out of 4 lanes are closed southbound. There's an accident between junctions 4A and 5. From the M42 to Droitwich, it's taking an hour and 20 minutes in queues back beyond junction 4 at Bromsgrove. In Essex, the A12 is closed southbound between junctions 26 and 25 near Colchester because of a spillage. There are queues from junction 28. In London, the A41 Baker Street in Marylebone is closed because of a fire. Train services are suspended into and out of Marylebone Station in London because of an incident. In Hampshire, the A327 is closed each way between Minley Manor and junction 4A of the M3 at Farnborough after an accident causing queues. And in Devon, the A38 is closed westbound from Rangerton Cross to Ivy Bridge after a vehicle caught fire causing delays. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Welcome back. I tell you what, I hope you're nice and warm out there. It's a bit nippy in this studio, it has to be said. In any case, I'm not meant to say things like that, am I? But it is. Right, I'm Dawn Neeson and this is GB News, and later in the show I'll talk about a sharp fall in people applying to move to the UK. I wonder if it's anything to do with the riots. But let's return to the riot show. Well, we can't avoid this subject. They are the worst riots we've seen in a decade, and police are significantly increasing their presence at several football matches tonight and over the weekend. Football season kicks off this weekend, Championship, Premiership next weekend. And there are fears that hooligan gangs could kick off, and those who have taken part in the past week of unrest could be barred from future matches. Starmer had this to say earlier.
I think there are a lot of things in the mix this weekend. But, of course, whatever the challenge, we have to rise to it. And that's why I've had Cobra meetings. That's why I've been talking to the police today about their plans for the weekend. Yes, football is added into the mix. There are other things in the mix. But our focus has to be absolutely solely on the safety and security of our communities. And that's exactly where it is.
But is it really fair to lump rioting thugs in with football fans like myself? Come on, you Irons, by the way. We're not playing this weekend, that's next weekend. Joining me now to discuss is former Scotland Yard detective and, unfortunately for him, a QPR fan. We all have our crosses to bear. Peter Blexley. Peter, I got very annoyed about this story. Police are examining links between far-right extremists and football hooligans amid, violence flaring up this weekend. Said Keir Starmer, who's an Arsenal fan, by the way, and goes regularly. I bet he gets prawn sandwiches, though. It's implying that football fans are somehow linked to rioting and far-right thugs. What do you make of all this?
this is lazy labelling, like it's so easy to do when they say everybody who stupidly threw a brick at a police officer is a far-right thug. Just labelling, ill thought out, painting people with a very broad brush, with not a lot of evidence with which to support it. Football has come a very long way since the 70s and the 80s, when it was riddled with rampant violence. And you will now go to any football ground in the country playing at any level and find families, children in unprecedented numbers. So this is lazy, it's wrong, and it's prejudicial against the good, decent football fans.
It is really annoying, isn't it, Peter? I mean, I do find it quite upsetting. I've been going to football since I was a little kid with my dad, and it's like, you know, all right, yeah, things were bad at certain points, but things have moved on so much. So why do you think they're doing... You know, Keir Starmer's thing, right, isn't it, Peter, is engaging with the community. He does a lot of engaging with communities. But meanwhile, if you're a football fan, and I'm stereotyping, but it's normally white, working-class blokes, you're not getting any engagement at all. You're being dismissed as you're probably going to start a riot because you are a football fan and you're very definitely going to be far right if that's the case.
When Keir Starmer and any other senior politician engages with the public, as they call it, these are pre-arranged, stage-managed meetings with the cameras there for all the photo opportunities and all the sound bites. It's not like you and me, both very talkative people who speak to the cab drivers, the people working on the tube, the people working in the restaurant, the people in pubs and clubs and on the street. I speak to people every single day of the week. That's community engagement, not a stage-managed setup. So consequently, when you put that together with the fact that the Westminster bubble is just an echo chamber full of some of the most unworldly people I've ever come across, some of whom work as special advisors to these politicians. And believe you me, there's nothing special about them, and I wouldn't take any advice off them. Couple all those things together, they're in an echo chamber, they're not very worldly, and all these engagements are mere photo opportunities.
Yeah, and this is just going to inflame football fans more. I mean, you know, I'm a sort of like mild-mannered middle-aged woman, honestly, and I just think I'm angry at being tarred with this brush purely because I follow a particular sport.
Yeah, but I've been on the end of some very rough-handed treatment from police through following my beloved Queen's Park Rangers for decade after decade, when I have done absolutely nothing wrong.
Yeah.
Other perhaps than arrive in a city that's not mine on a train with some fellow football supporters. We've been herded, we've been shoved, we've been pushed, we've been abused. Sometimes it goes with the territory. Less so, I must say, in recent times at the hands of the police than back in the 90s in particular, where they were all a bit quick to raise their hands and shove us around. And that's a good thing. But yeah, many millions, quite literally millions, of decent law-abiding football fans have been besmirched by this lazy language. It's just bone idle, lazy terminology, applying it to millions of people, not a shred of evidence.
No. And I'm glad you mentioned that because, I mean, football fans are, you know, at the very front of two-tier policing, aren't they? I mean, it's like one law for us just trying to get to an away ground, walking peacefully down the street, with being kettled, literally just walking to a ground, and one law for people that are going back to the BLM marches and riots when people were chucking things at police horses and the police were running away.
Or look at the pro-Palestine marches that we've had almost every weekend since the 7th of October last year, when people are issuing rotten chants, racist, vile chants, and waving flags and banners which should have got them instantly arrested, like with the verve, perhaps, and the rigour, that rioters are quite rightfully being arrested now. If only we'd seen that kind of consistency throughout some of those marches, a lot of people would be a lot happier.
Yeah, indeed. All right, Peter, who have QPR got this weekend, then?
West Brom at home, 1:45 kick-off tomorrow. If you can't get down there, it's on the telly. Enjoy.
Good luck and stay safe out there. That's Peter Blexley, a former police officer. Thank you very much for joining us. And a QPR fan, obviously. Thank you very much, Peter. Always a pleasure. Now, we move on. Kamala Harris is now the bookmakers' favourite to become the new US president. We get the latest on her battle with Donald Trump. I'm Dawn Neeson, and this is GB News, Britain's news channel. Please don't go too far. We've got a cracking show coming up.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Tom, dying to talk to you about this. Transport for London, right? They run the buses and tubes and things in London. And they've got £2.5 million. £2.5 million, which they're going to spend on what?
Diversity training. I dare say they've probably got plenty of it already.
But let me tell you something. I sit on a board of a company, and I was diversity trained recently.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, really?
And I must admit,
What was that like?
Well, I think it was like stating the bleeding obvious, right? So you sit there and you say, well, why would I do that? Or why would I treat someone like that? I wouldn't do that in the first place. I don't need to be trained in this. And you just sat there for 6 hours while people told you the obvious. But what do you think of spending that amount of money for Transport for London?
It's crazy because, on the one hand, do we need this diversity training? The TfL is an incredibly diverse workforce already. The idea that there are barriers to entry there doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. Also, as you say, these things are commonsensical, really. And to the point, sometimes they can become problematic because they're not just saying, you know, be open and tolerant of people and so on. It's actually preaching a more kind of divisive sort of rhetoric to people, which can be a big problem in the
get your
workplace.
diversity training from your boss or somebody, don't you? Somebody pulls you up and says, you don't talk to people like that. If this is how you talk to them. That's it. Done.
It should be that
spend
simple.
6 hours in front of...
And I know that in the grand scheme of things, £2.5 million is kind of money down the back of the sofa. But at the same time, my local tube station just closes early on random nights of the week because of the fact that they haven't got enough staff.
4 years ago, there were 655 people at City Hall earning over £100,000 a year. People might argue that's 655 too many. There are 1,100 now. In 4 years later.
1,100?
Actually, 1,142 to be precise.
The People's Channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
As time passes, she could have said storm.
You made my argument for me. My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
Went everywhere.
Something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Stephen Dixon, and thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome back. Hope you've got a nice cup of tea in front of you, or possibly it's a Friday, possibly a nice cold beer or something. I don't blame you in the slightest. I'm Dawn Neeson and this is GB News. Right, let's have a look at what some of you have been saying. Lots of support in the room for what both Peter Blexley and Khadija were saying earlier on in the show. This is Norman. You say, I started to write a post about two-tier Britain, but I stopped and was in fear of being arrested. I can be locked up for expressing my thoughts on Facebook. Government censorship is now stopping any shred of free speech. Lots of you are saying similar sentiments there as well, and that's obviously that 55-year-old woman from Cheshire has been arrested for posting something misleading on X, formerly Twitter. And Alvin, point of law, says if a person pleads not guilty, they are entitled to a proper trial. Clearly, the people that are going so quickly through our courts are pleading guilty. Yeah, that's true, but I mean, even so, it's remarkably speedy, isn't it? And I'm still slightly well, angry, I think is the word, that, you know, when the justice system wants to get moving, it can get moving. And meanwhile, so many people are waiting for cases to go to court. Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Enough said, they can do it when they want to serve themselves, but not you or me. And also, the justice seen to be done rhetoric refers to process, not outcome. No secret courts. Well, I mean, anything's possible, isn't it, those days? OK, lots more comments coming. Do keep your comments coming in, and I will read as many out as possible. And yes, you can even ask me why I'm wearing black today, and to be completely honest with you, it's because I've run out of colours. Right, OK. Now, let's move on, shall we? Oh, no, hold on. No, we've got some more coming in. Right, Michael, thank you very much. Michael said, I think we should all be careful with what we post on social media, as they could be coming for you. Oh, God. A lot of you are saying that, really, and a lot of you are worried. Did you know that in Venezuela, they are actually going to ban Twitter, X, for 10 days. I mean, I know Venezuela is sort of like a fire-ring dictatorship, but, I mean, they're going to ban it. I mean, is that something that you could possibly see coming here? Meanwhile, Catherine has said, protesters who are causing trouble are simply thugs. Shouldn't give them more credit than that. Meanwhile, John says, too little, too late from Starmer. Interesting, isn't it? I mean, do you think... I mean, I keep coming back to the people who are getting prosecuted. Obviously, we don't know too much about individual cases, but, you know, there are people sitting in bingo halls having a beer, and they're being sort of like, you know, what was it, 2 years? How politically motivated are there? There are so many questions. No one's condoning rioting, obviously. But if we want some even more mad politics, should we go across to America and see what's happening over there? Makes you feel slightly better, doesn't it? Presidential hopefuls Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris will go head-to-head in their first televised debate next month. But who will come out on top? God, this is going to be a ratings blockbuster. Joining me now is the Professor of International Politics, David Dunn. David, thank you for joining me. Lovely to see you this afternoon. David, so the debate is on. Trump and Kamala Harris are going to go head-to-head. What's your prediction for how this one's going to go?
Well, it'll be a blockbuster. 51 million watched the last one, and it caused one of the candidates to fall out. So everyone's going to be watching this time round to see whether any of them trips up, makes a mistake, gives that one gaffe line that actually makes a big impact on the race. So presidential debates have never been so important as they are this time. It's big-time television.
And, I mean, obviously, you know, with Biden, with the whole the mental health issues and the we don't know what was wrong, but there were issues with him. Kamala Harris is a completely different kettle of fish, isn't she?
It's a changed race entirely. And in fact, it seems that Trump doesn't know how to respond to her. He's calling her names, mispronouncing her name. He seems nostalgic for the loss of Biden as his candidate. Against Biden, Trump was ascendant, and now the race has turned around, and she's ahead in the polls.
David, thank you very much for your... So quick, we've run out of time. That's Professor David Dunn. Thank you very much. Now, obviously, it's the all-important, it's the weekend. Weather with Alex Birtle. Here's what's coming.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good afternoon. Here's your Met Office weather for GB News. Whilst there will be a bit of cloud, a bit of rain around at times tomorrow, it's looking sunnier and hotter for many on Sunday. But for the time being, it is still quite blustery out there, especially across northern parts. There's quite a pressure gradient with an area of low pressure to the north of the UK, and it's this that's driving some breezy conditions. Also, plenty of showers to end the day across parts of Scotland in particular, and some of them could be quite heavy, but rattling through quite quickly because of those brisk winds. Elsewhere, turning largely dry with some clear skies, especially towards the east overnight, but thicker cloud and a bit of rain pushing in from the west. In the west, then, temperatures holding up mid to possibly high teens for some of us, a little bit fresher where we have some clearer skies further east. Now, taking a closer look, first thing tomorrow morning, and across parts of Scotland, it will still be a bit breezy, and there will again be some showers around, perhaps some longer spells of rain for a time, particularly across western Scotland, all of that drifting northeastwards. A few showers perhaps for parts of Northern Ireland and northwest England, a brighter picture for northeast England. Also down the eastern side of England, a good deal of fine sunny weather for some to begin with, but the outbreaks of rain, which could be heavy over the hills towards the west, gradually making their way eastwards as we go through the morning. So for many parts of England and Wales, it is going to be quite a grey day, and there will be a bit of rain at times, though it shouldn't be too heavy for most of us. Further north, a slightly brighter picture, similar to today really, some blustery showers rattling through, though the winds not quite as strong. In the north, temperatures getting into the high teens, low 20s, mid 20s for some of us towards the southeast. later on tomorrow we will start to see the cloud and any rain across England and Wales drifting away towards the east. So some clearer skies developing as we go through the night, and the showers in the north should start to die out as well. And then Sunday for most is looking fine with a decent amount of sunshine, with temperatures rising as we go into Monday. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. In East Lothian, the A6093 is closed each way near Ormiston because of a burst water main. On the M5 in Worcestershire, 2 out of 4 lanes are closed southbound after an accident between junctions 4A and 5 from the M42 to Droitwich. It's been taking an hour and 10 minutes in queues back beyond junction 4 at Bromsgrove. In Essex, the A12 is closed southbound between junctions 26 and 25 near Colchester because of a shed load. There are queues from junction 28. In London, Baker Street in Marylebone is closed northbound, where they're dealing with a fire. Train services into and out of Marylebone Station in London are suspended because of an incident. In Hampshire, the A327 is closed each way between Minley Manor and the M3 at Farnborough after an accident causing queues. And in Devon, the A38 is partly blocked westbound with a vehicle caught fire between Mangerton Cross and Ivy Bridge. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
We could be calling you with the news that you've won our latest Great British giveaway. An incredible £30,000 in tax-free cash. David from Kent was our last big winner. Listen to what he had to say about getting that winning call.
Hi, I'm David from Kent and I won £15,000 and he couldn't have come at a better time. I was gobsmacked. What have you got to lose for what it costs? In fact, I've done it again this week, so I'd recommend it to anybody.
For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2 or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 869.
Right, a bit of breaking news for you. We're going to cross straight to Leeds Crown Court, where Jordan Plain is being sentenced for racially aggravated harassment over the Leeds riots.
And it caused alarm and distress to others, in particular to Miss Sawu, who has had the courage to come to court to tell me and others, including you, how she felt and how she feels. To summarise only, she was scared, anxious, traumatised by your behaviour. She was fearful of violence. She felt like she didn't belong in her own home city, the city of Leeds, where she has lived for all of her life, to the extent that she was scared to go to work for 4 days following this incident. She remains anxious and she remains worried about returning to work and to her university. You were arrested on the 5th of August and then interviewed. You are now 30 years of age, and in particular you have convictions in July of 2012 for racially aggravated causing fear of violence and criminal damage. Those convictions are an aggravating factor. You have further convictions as an adult, including for violence. What you have done cannot be viewed in isolation. It must be viewed against the background of unrest and disorder in the country. This was your contribution to that disorder. Your conduct and that of your group was designed to stir up racial hatred. It took place at a time when the social climate was particularly sensitive. By the 3rd of August, there had already been disorder in Southport, Manchester, Hartlepool, Aldershot, London, Liverpool and Sunderland. I will now turn to and follow the sentencing guidelines. In terms of culpability, I find that this falls into category A, since it involves the targeting of individuals by a group and it was a sustained incident. It also falls into category 1 for harm, since Ms Sawo and the people like her feared serious violence, not only on that day, but also on subsequent days. The starting point for a category 1A offence without the aggravating factor of racial aggravation is a high-level community order with a range of up to 26 weeks imprisonment. Given the context and the background of this incident and others around the country, I would have placed this offence at the top of the range. I must now consider the level of racial or religious aggravation involved and apply an appropriate uplift to the sentence in accordance with the guidelines. I am careful not to double count. I find that racial and religious aggravation was the predominant motivation for the offence, and you were associated with a group which was promoting hostility based upon colour, race, religion. In those circumstances, I will increase the starting point that I consider to be appropriate. As I have said, your position is aggravated by your convictions for similar offending in 2012, for which you received a custodial sentence. At the forefront of my mind are the purposes of sentence, which in this case are punishment and deterrence. In mitigation, I take into account that you pleaded guilty at the first available opportunity, and you will receive full credit, that being 1/3. I also take into consideration your letter indicating your remorse. I take account of the comments of the probation officer that you are a single man living alone but with responsibilities for a child with whom you have regular contact. You say that this behaviour was caused by intoxication, but I note the similar convictions in the past. You are expressed by the probation service to be a high risk of reoffending. You are not in employment, although apparently fit and well. I will now turn to the sentence. Would you stand, please? Given the context in which this incident occurred and the sustained nature of your conduct, which was designed to stir up racial hatred at a time of heightened social tension, an immediate custodial sentence cannot be avoided. The sentence that I pass has been reduced by 1/3 to reflect your guilty plea. The sentence is one of 8 months imprisonment. You will serve up to 1/2 of your sentence in custody before you are released on licence. If you fail to abide by the conditions of your licence, you can be returned to prison to serve some or all of the remainder of your custodial term. The victim surcharge will apply, and I will make a collection order. Would you please take him down?
Right, OK, well, as you say, that's the latest person accused of racially aggravated the crime during the riots. So I've got now GB News political editor Chris Hope with me to discuss just how fast these cases are going through our courts. And we were saying during the break, Christopher, that it's probably something to do with Keir Starmer's background, that he knows the levers to pull to make this work.
That's right, a former DPP, Director of Public Prosecutions, ran the Crown Prosecution Service during the last big riots in 2011 in this country. 3,000 arrests there. I think a couple of thousand were charged after that. We're down at 500 arrests now. Really serious, of course, for those people and for the communities affected, but barely 1/6 of the numbers arrested in 2011. But he knows that back then, of course, we had courts sitting through the night, magistrate courts to get urgent charging and convictions. And clearly he's learnt that lesson here. He's pulled some levers in government. He's made sure that the CPS is quick. So we have got violence and trouble last week, arresting, charging,
guilty, off to prison the following week. That is unusual, but it's clearly been done by the government, or organised by the government, with the support of the court service to send a message to people: just don't get in trouble, because it can really blight your career and deprive you of liberty.
Do you think Sir Keir Starmer believes that the way they are doing this, the way they are handling this, is having an effect on people wanting to go out and cause unrest? I mean, we saw on Wednesday there weren't the threatened far-right, in inverted commas if you're listening on the radio, protests that were threatened. That didn't happen. So do you think Sir Keir Starmer and the Labour government are convinced that it's their behaviour that's stopping that, or is there something else maybe going on?
Part of it, and no question that the police are important to this. You know, thousands of officers ready to be deployed around the country using special powers last used in 2011. Sir Keir Starmer had his third Cobra meeting since the killings.
Is that unusual, Christopher?
Three
in, what, a week?
Yeah, I think he took a while to have the first one, frankly.
Yeah.
I mean, the first one, I think, was the weekend, maybe Sunday, I think. And there was one after that and then one last night. I think he waited a bit too long, maybe, but I mean, as things stand, you know, he's coordinating these Cobra meetings. What that means is, it means Cabinet Office Briefing Room A, where they've got a room. I've never been to it. We will never go to it unless you run the country door one day. But if you look around, the screens in there allowing someone like the PM to get a grip on and get immediate access to data, what's going on, what are the cameras we have around the country seeing. He had a meeting last night of senior advisors, probably the Home Secretary there, although we haven't had a readout. He says at that meeting that the police will be on high alert this weekend, because we have to absolutely make sure that our communities are safe and secure. He said there that social media is not a law-free zone, and we're seeing the sentencing right now in courts across, in some parts of the country about people for putting things on Facebook and elsewhere and land themselves up in prison, it seems, or certainly with a conviction, and more sentencing happening today. He said if you're directly involved or whether you're remotely involved, you are culpable and you will be put before the courts if you've broken the law. So he's doing the bits he knows about, Dawn, which is dealing with prosecutions, getting the kind of system working, frankly, in the most efficient way we've seen it in some years. The harder problem he's got is the political choice. Where do you go after this? How do you make sure these communities are, you know, how do you reach out to communities that are hit by the violence? What did you do next? Do you just call them far right? And there were far right. I mean, look on the screen now. There are far right people involved in this, but around the margins, there are people maybe who are there who aren't far right, just concerned about migration. What do you do about those people? I don't know if we have the clip, but I spoke to Craig McKinley, the former Tory MP for South Thanet and now a peer. We can't got the clip, but he did say on my podcast, Chopper's Political Podcast, that there were normal people, some people you might expect to go and see in the Dog and Duck on a Friday afternoon, involved in some of these marches and the like. So he thinks that it's dangerous to say it's all far right, because that hardly goes towards where the actual problems is for all the people. I think the clip's available now.
Following the riots since those dreadful killings in Southport last week, Craig McKinley, are you comfortable about the blame on the far right? A lot of viewers, listeners to GB News are concerned about the idea that the government's been willing to say it's just the far right, and that almost says if you're worried about immigration, it's a far right issue, when of course, as we know, it's a wider issue and a deeper issue than just one held by some thugs on the far right.
Well, I mean, if the far right are that good at organising things, then they're far better at organising things than any political party or government that I know in the UK. So I actually don't believe fully. I mean, there's always going to be some nutters, and they should be dealt with very robustly, and they should be in prison where appropriate. I'm fully in favour of all of that. But if you look at some of these, rallies that are going on, there are lots of couples on these rallies that you'd expect to go and see in the Dog and Duck on a Friday afternoon. These are normal people, and I think what happened with Southport, it's sort of culminated what I feel is a deep malaise in this country, a deep worry, and it sort of brought it together in an unexpected way. And I'm afraid that's how things often happen. You know, it's like the butterfly wings in Brazil create a storm in Africa. You know, this is almost one of those moments where I think a lot of people have said, forget what the Southport was actually all about. It actually made people rather annoyed about the state of Britain today. I mean, I was so upset about that Southport incident.
That's Craig McKinney there talking to my podcast, Chopper's Political Podcast. This will have a long tail to it, the drama of the past 9 days or so, because you have got these individuals being jailed. 3 years in Liverpool, 30 months, 20 months, more jailing today, more convictions, I should say, in Leeds. The government policy, though, is if you're jailed for less than 4 years, and in most cases, you will only serve 40%, not 50% of your term. That's to ease jail overcrowding. So you might well see people being convicted at the moment being released early, and that in itself could be a problem for the government when that starts to happen.
Because, I mean, we were told in the run-up to sort of like the general election, just after it, there weren't any prison cells. I mean, we were down to, I think, the last 600.
A few hundred.
Yeah, it was like literally 600, and, you know, there were so many cases going through, and yet suddenly there's room.
It seems that way, doesn't it? I think this is all, again, this is the state almost demonstrating its power to people, saying, careful what you're doing here, because we are going to be really tough on this. And the sentencing is long for some of these people.
What's the long-term game plan with this? So obviously they are making a point now. They are sort of like, you know, getting these cases through. They're getting people in prison. But at some point, there has to be some game plan as to where this goes and what it means for our political our justice system.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I think that you know, I think it does show how fast the system can move when it has to, because they are moving this fast, and they're allowing us to see it in court, of course, using new legislation of the Tory party. But that is helpful because we are someone demonstrating there's a price to be paid for being involved in this fight, fighting and rioting, which is appalling and disgraceful. It doesn't go to the heart of why some people are demonstrating, I think, and that's the political challenge we haven't yet seen from the government.
This is the point, I think, the big point here, and many of you, and please do keep your messages coming in, many of you are asking, when are the politicians going to engage with us? So we've seen Sir Keir Starmer engaging with communities around the country, sitting, talking to imams, etc., all very fine and good. But a lot of people are saying, they need to sit and talk to us. They need to listen to us. We are the voters.
And you can't just say it's all far right, because it's not really... People who are concerned about migration, legal or illegal migration, we know from our email inbox, don't we,
Yeah,
Dawn,
very much so, yeah.
But look at Reforming UK, look how the Tories lost the election basically on failing to a large part on immigration. It's not a far-right issue to be worried about these issues, and that's why I think we haven't heard yet from the government how they're going to deal with that.
Yeah, no, it'd be very interesting to see... Well, are they going on holiday, though?
Are they? Well, we'll find out on Monday. This week we were told the PM was not planning to go on holiday, so isn't. I'm sure he wants a break. I mean, he's fought and won an election. Yeah. He's been on election watch since about April. It's now August. He needs to reboot. Will he get a chance to? And it all depends, I think, on if this country is at peace with itself.
Well, fingers crossed.
We hope it is.
Yeah, well, hopefully this weekend with the football starting, maybe people will be distracted and not go and kick off at football, by the way. Just go and watch a decent game of football, depending on your team, obviously. Christopher Hope, thank you very much for joining us. Now, we will have lots more on the riots later in the show, and there's plenty of coverage on our website, gbnews.com. You've helped to make it the fastest-growing national news website in the country, so thank you very much for that. Now, the Olympics, which normally is a nice bit of light relief, isn't it? However, the controversial boxer Imane Khalif could win that gold medal at the Olympics this evening. But one famous former British Olympian says the people she's beaten in Paris should take legal action. Wow. I'm Dawn Newsom. This is GB News. You don't want to miss what's coming next. Don't go too far.
Legal action.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Apparently, almost 70% of 18 to 25-year-olds, we don't know whether that's men or women, but they say that women shouldn't breastfeed in public. 19% would even go as far as labelling it disgusting.
Well, only a quarter of Brits say that women shouldn't have to cover up when they're breastfeeding. So clearly there is a big debate here and one to get to the bottom of. And to do so, we're joined by parenting journalist Annette Kellu. Really good to see you this morning, Annette.
Really good to see you.
Why is this stigma still existing in our society?
I think we've got a case case here going on of double standards. I don't know about you, but I live near a park, OK? One little hint of sun, the men get completely naked. Honestly, you've never seen anything like it. The bodies are out, all different shapes and sizes. So why is it not OK for a woman to feed her baby? You know, we've got this whole thing. They're OK to be naked doing what they want. Why can't a woman just feed her baby? Why is it shameful in 2024? And it's interesting what you say about the 18 to 25-year-olds, because I really want to know, are they men or women? Because I feel like they'd be men.
I was going to say, have you got a hunch? Have you got a suspicion?
Yes, I have. And I think as well, they're thinking of them as sexy time, you know? And I feel like they're not... Well, maybe that's because they're bombarded with images and they see things like that they're seeing it in that context. But it's really not. It's feeding the baby. It's simple. Shouldn't be shameful.
But do you think for men it's like they can't see the difference? There's so much porn in society, isn't there, that breasts are sexualised and seen as this sexual object and not actually for their main primary purpose, which is actually feeding a child.
Media association.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
they can't.
And you can't see that they could have two functions.
Absolutely. And to them as well, I feel like they see it, and on the other side of it, they think like, ooh, mummy, and that brings up weird feelings for them, maybe.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled.
Lovely. Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back, I'm Dawn Neeson and this is GB News. Now, later this hour, get reaction to London Mayor Sadiq Khan's claim that he does not feel safe as a Muslim following the recent riots. But before we go to that, I'm going to go to GB News political correspondent Olivia Utley is at City Hall today and brings us this report.
Yes, Sadiq Khan has done this very powerful interview yesterday where he talked about being a Muslim politician in London and no longer feeling safe. He said he felt triggered by last week's events and suggested that he had hoped that his generation would be the last to experience this sort of racism in the capital. But now he feels as though his children are going through the same experience. It feels as though what's been happening over the past couple of days is that this heated debate, this argument, has shifted from the streets. It now seems as though the government is getting a hold on the riots on the streets to the more political sector. Sadiq Khan has hit out two Conservative politicians and former Conservative politicians, particularly Suella Braverman, the former Home Secretary, and Lee Anderson, now a Reform MP. And he has suggested that those two politicians have sort of helped to incite the sort of hatred that we've been seeing on the streets in recent weeks. Will Braverman and Lee Anderson hit back? It doesn't feel as though this debate is getting any less toxic. The only potentially helpful thing for Keir Starmer is that immigration is actually going down, legal immigration that is. Now, why is that? That is because of changes introduced by Rishi Sunak's government before they left office in May. Because of changes to the immigration plans whereby people on student visas or care visas can no longer bring dependents over. People on those visas have dipped from over 90,000 last year to less than 60,000 this year. That might give Keir Starmer a bit of a leg up going forwards, but for now it does not feel as though the heat is going out of this debate.
Thank you very much, Olivia. Now, loads of you have been getting in touch and there is a slight glitch with the system, but if you keep trying, they do come through to us, so please do keep trying. Not a lot of love in the room for Keir Starmer. Ben said, Comrade Starmer must go. Mary, meanwhile, is questioning, when did court sentencing become live TV? I thought only appeal courts at the High Court of Justice were filmed. Well, I'm not entirely sure what the rules are around that, but nothing is as we expect it to be at the moment, is it, Mary? I mean, the speed these are going through the courts. And Barry, a lot of you are asking the same question as Barry. Why is Cutthroat Jones, you know, the Labour councillor at the Walthamstow Peace March, who said that the rioters should have their throats cut, why is he not being charged with incitement to murder? Well, he's been arrested. We don't know what's happening yet. And then we just read that one. And Starmer, Dave says, Starmer says social media is not a law-free zone. Well, a lot of people agreeing with that at the moment. And, would Starmer lock the thugs up? Now, please do keep all your comments coming in on that, and we are going to talk about all aspects of the riots, because it is the only thing in town, and all we can all hope for is that it doesn't kick off again this weekend. We've got the football season coming up. The Championship kicks off this weekend. Charity Shield this weekend. So hopefully it will calm down. But what I know from you is, do you think the way Keir Starmer and the Labour government have handled this situation, do you think that's what's calming it down? Or do you think that maybe the other night the weather wasn't as good, it was during the week? And are you worried about what's coming up this weekend? I mean, are you worried? I mean, as we've seen Sadiq Khan say, he is worried to be a Muslim in London at the moment. And I was talking to my friend Chris Akabusi the other day, and he was saying that as a black man, this is Chris Akabusi, an Olympian, he served as a soldier for this country. He was saying that as a black man now, he also feels more vulnerable. I mean, this is what they're experiencing. Oh, what do you think about that? I mean, if you're a person of colour, are you feeling more vulnerable out there? Is it something you're worried about? Something you're worried about letting your kids go out, during the day? It is worrying times, and we just hope that it does actually stay a bit more peaceful this weekend. Now, we are going to go and start talking about the Olympics very soon, because normally sport is one of those things that is a distraction, isn't it? It really is. It's like, especially the Olympics, we're doing incredibly well. Right, OK. But before we go to the Olympics, we have actually got a clip of Sadiq Khan talking about how he feels when he's out and about in London. And let's have a listen, shall we?
It's really important that we are, not complacent and we're vigilant. I'm really proud of what our police service has done, not just over the last 24 hours, but the last few weeks. Yesterday, more than 1,000 police officers making sure our communities were safe from the threat of the far right. We know from across the country that they're trying to spread violence, racism and hatred. And I'm also proud of Londoners who came together united against racism, Islamophobia and anti-Semitism. We've got to recognise, though, the far right's not gone away.
OK, now the London Mayor is wading in on the riots across the country, and Sadiq Khan, as you've just heard, declared he no longer feels safe as a Muslim in London. He says despite the anti-fascist demonstrations, many people from minority communities do feel scared. So joining me now is social policy analyst, Dr Rakib Ehsan. Rakib, thank you very much for joining me this afternoon. What do you make of what you have heard Sadiq Khan say in particular?
Well, it's understandable, Dawn. We've seen the far-right disorder. It's had a decidedly anti-Muslim dimension. We saw in the aftermath of that horrific atrocity in Southport, the killing of the 3 little girls. We saw anti-Muslim conspiracy theories speculating what the background of the suspect is, not just speculating, but saying the suspect is illegal Muslim migrant of Middle Eastern origin who arrived in the UK by crossing the English Channel from France. So I think we've also seen during the rioting the targeting of mosques and Muslim communities more generally. So I think that these are troubling times, and I think understandably there'll be families within our British Muslim communities who are deeply unsettled by it.
Rakib, what do you think of the way Sir Keir Starmer and the Labour government are handling the situation at the moment? I mean, some of the language, as a white working-class football fan, I'm still finding some of the rhetoric coming from them. It's troubling. What do you make of sort of like, you know, the whole link between now we've seen the link between football fans and some of the rioters and the fact that we're still using the phrase far right to describe people who are maybe just have genuine concerns. Not talking about people breaking the law, but people who have genuine concerns about where this country is going with immigration. What do you say to that, Rakib?
Well, I think, Dawn, if we're talking about people deliberately peddling anti-Muslim conspiracy theories, rioters targeting mosques, but also Muslim-owned businesses, and knowing that they are Muslim-owned businesses, that is classic far-right behaviour, and we should call it out. I think what we have to do, we have to disentangle what is quite blatant forms of far-right disorder, and then perfectly legitimate concerns over immigration and asylum policy, and indeed integration, and we can go even further than that, Islamist extremism. But I think that what you'll find, Dawn, is that the average British voter who has concerns, those conservative concerns over immigration, asylum policy, how integration is working or rather not working in this country, they tend to have a very firm respect for the rule of law. They tend to be very conservative when it comes to matters of law and order as well. So I think that it's very clear that the Prime Minister, he's wanted to clamp down, and he wants to clamp down on these disorders through mass arrests, and the courts operating for longer hours in order to enable swifter prosecutions. But of course, we should continue having the conversation in terms of how do we foster a more just and stable democratic national community. And that does involve having admittedly sensitive conversations on matters of immigration and asylum policy.
Do you think they're doing enough of that at the moment, Rakib?
No, in my view, no. I think that the Labour Party hasn't done that for some times. I think that that's why there's a fundamental disconnect between the Labour Party and many traditional white British working class communities. And I think that Sir Keir Starmer, he's had a number of opportunities in interviews where he's been asked, but do you at least acknowledge that there are perfectly legitimate concerns surrounding immigration and asylum? But he hasn't really engaged with those points. And I think that that's somewhat troubling. Now, of course, he's taken a very rational, clear-cut approach in terms of there need to be mass arrests, there need to be swift prosecutions, and people who are guilty of any form of criminality, they should meet the full force of the law. But I would like to hear a sort of a vision for the country moving forwards. How do we move on from this? And how do we have a more stable, prosperous and decent society? At the moment, I'm not hearing much of that from the Prime Minister, unfortunately.
Yeah, just finally, Rakib, one thing that they may be considering going forward is a legal definition of Islamophobia in the same way that anti-Semitism is defined. Sure. What do you make to that?
Well, I think this is the thing. So I think you're referring to the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism. And ultimately, this APPG, British Muslims Working Definition of Islamophobia, it is modelled on that IHRA definition of anti-Semitism. And I actually have problems with both, because I think that in some cases that the definitions, they tend to provide cover for foreign regimes, when I think the focus needs to be fighting discrimination against religious minorities living in the UK. And in my view, we shouldn't conflate discrimination with perfectly legitimate criticism of foreign regimes and also more broadly religious belief systems.
Yeah. I mean, it has been, very briefly, I really appreciate your time this afternoon, it has been, critics have said it could amount to a blasphemy law by the back door. What do you say to that?
In my view, we need to guard against that.
Oh, Rakib. Oh, right, OK. Well, I think we lost Rakib there very briefly, but thank you, Rakib, for joining us. We're going to go to the news headlines now, I believe, and it's Tatiana Sanchez.
Dawn, thank you very much. The top stories this hour. A 30-year-old man has been jailed for 8 months for racially aggravated intentional harassment during the riots in Leeds. The judge said his sentence was reduced to take his guilty plea into account. At one point, Jordan Plain was filmed with others mocking Muslim prayers.
And a Facebook user who urged people to attack a Leeds hotel used to house asylum seekers has also been jailed. 28-year-old Jordan Parler has been sentenced to 20 months after pleading guilty to publishing written material intended to stir racial hatred. Meanwhile, 2 men have been sent to prison for an attack on what prosecutors described as pro-EDL protesters after rival demonstrations clashed in Leeds city centre last Saturday. Leeds Crown Court was shown CCTV footage of a large group of Asian men kicking and punching a smaller group of 4 white men. 21-year-old Samir Ali from Leeds and 31-year-old Adnan Ghaffar, also from Leeds, admitted a fray earlier this week. It comes as the Prime Minister has issued a warning to those using social media to encourage violence and disorder. Visiting the Metropolitan Police Command Centre in central London, Sir Keir Starmer said social media is not a law-free zone. He said the police are actively pursuing those breaking the law online with more swift sentences. He said it was a reminder to everyone that whether they're directly involved or remotely involved, those people are still culpable. The National Police Chiefs Council has said 595 arrests have been made in relation to disorder across the country following the Southport stabbings attack. Former Labour councillor Ricky Jones has been charged with encouraging violent disorder. It's after he was filmed addressing a crowd at a London demonstration on Wednesday evening, that coming from the Crown Prosecution Service. He's appearing at Westminster Magistrates Court shortly. And disgraced former BBC News presenter Hugh Edwards has been asked to return his salary by the corporation's board. It comes after the 62-year-old admitted in court last week to having indecent images of children. 7 of the 41 images were described as being in the most serious category of child abuse pictures and videos. The BBC's board has told him to repay his salary from the time he was arrested in November last year, saying the presenter undermined trust in the BBC and brought it into disrepute. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much, Tatiana. Now, if you want to get in touch, simply go to gbnews.com/your-say. It's having a Friday afternoon moment at the moment, but please do keep trying. It is correcting itself. So keep your messages coming in because it's so important. I love reading them out. I read it. I'm Dawn Neeson, and this is GB News, Britain's news channel. Time to put the kettle on, but please come back very quick because we've got a cracking show still for you.
Good afternoon. Here's your Met Office weather for GB News. Whilst there will be a bit of cloud, a bit of rain around at times tomorrow, it's looking sunnier and hotter for many on Sunday. But for the time being, it is still quite blustery out there, especially across northern parts. There's quite a pressure gradient with an area of low pressure to the north of the UK, and it's this that's driving some breezy conditions. Also, plenty of showers to end the day across parts of Scotland in particular, and some of them could be quite heavy, but rattling through quite quickly because of those brisk winds. Elsewhere, turning largely dry with some clear skies, especially towards the east overnight, but thicker cloud and a bit of rain pushing in from the west. In the west, then, temperatures holding up mid to possibly high teens for some of us. A little bit fresher where we have some clearer skies further east. Now, taking a closer look, first thing tomorrow morning and across parts of Scotland, it will still be a bit breezy, and there will again be some showers around, perhaps some longer spells of rain for a time, particularly across western Scotland, all of that drifting northeastwards. A few showers perhaps for parts of Northern Ireland and northwest England, a brighter picture for northeast England. Also down the eastern side of England, a good deal of fine sunny weather for some to begin with, but the outbreaks of rain, which could be heavy over the hills towards the west, gradually making their way eastwards as we go through the morning. So for many parts of England and Wales, it is going to be quite a grey day, and there will be a bit of rain at times, though it shouldn't be too heavy for most of us. Further north, a slightly brighter picture, similar to today really, some blustery showers rattling through, though the winds not quite as strong. In the north, temperatures getting into the high teens, low 20s, mid 20s for some of us towards the southeast. later on tomorrow, we will start to see the cloud and any rain across England and Wales drifting away towards the east. So some clearer skies developing as we go through the night, and the showers in the north should start to die out as well. And then Sunday for most is looking fine with a decent amount of sunshine, with temperatures rising as we go into Monday. Bye-bye.
The latest GB News travel.
On the clockwise side of the M60, a lane closure to a vehicle fire from junction 4 through to junction 5 at Princess Parkway. Southbound on the M5, severe delays queuing traffic to an earlier accident from junction 4 through to junction 5. On the eastbound side of the M27, a lane closure and queuing traffic to recovery work following an accident from junction 4 through to Southampton Airport and Eastleigh at junction 5. There's also ongoing roadworks adding to the congestion. And southbound on the A12 as we look towards Essex, there is now a closure for the A12 causing severe delays. It's due to oil spillage from junctions 26 for 8 Ash Green through to junction 25, delays to junction 29 for the Crown interchange. And that's the very latest travel news.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello, welcome back. I'm Dawn Neeson, and I don't know my own name. Dawn Neeson even, in for Martin Daubney, and this is GB News. I just want to get excited by this. The system's working. Please do, messages coming in. Message from Paul. Paul, great comment, actually. If the government dealt with the illegal immigrants and foreign criminals as quickly as they would the protesters, there wouldn't be any protests. Two-tier justice system at work from two-tier Keir. Interesting. Lots of you agreeing with that as well. So, but keep them coming in. It's working. It's having a Friday afternoon moment. Come on, we all do it, don't we? Now, later in the show, I'll have the latest from day 14 of the Paris Olympics, where Katarina Johnson-Thompson, come on, girl, could win a gold medal this evening. She is amazing. But the controversy of the Games, isn't it? Algerian boxer Imane Khalif fights for the boxing gold tonight. But while the boxer is on the brink of Olympic glory, the journey that I'm going to say they had been on to get there hasn't been without controversy. The boxer was previously barred from women's competition as they not only have high levels of testosterone but also understood to have XY male chromosomes. A man's average punch has over 2.6 times the force of one delivered by a woman, and believe me, I know I've been on the end of one doing boxing training. It's not fun. Now, is this fair or even safe? Joining us now is co-founder and executive director at Sex Matters, Maya Fostata. Maya, thank you so much for joining me. Pleasure to talk to you this afternoon. Now, obviously, this controversy has been rambling on for a week now. Sharon Davis, in an interview in The Telegraph today, has raised fears of a woman Olympian being killed as she joins in the Fairness for Fair Sport campaigners in demanding sex tests for all competitors. What do you make of what Sharon's had to say? I mean, do you think that's a potential, a possibility?
Boxing is a dangerous sport, and a male boxer should not be fighting against women in the Olympics. It's a travesty, and it is dangerous, it's unfair and unsafe. I think Sharon is right.
Which isn't great news for female sport. I mean, boxing obviously is a contact sport, but I mean, you know, the same applies to so many sports where men are demonstrably stronger, fitter, faster, and yeah, as you say, in sports like boxing, it could be lethal. How have we got here, Maya? I mean, how have we got to this situation where we don't know the full details, but we think that, you know, these two boxers have XY chromosomes, which makes them biologically male. How are they even in this situation where they are fighting XX female boxers in the ring?
Well, the IOC, the Olympic organisers, they're in slightly an odd position, because for most sports they leave it up to the national governing bodies and the international governing bodies to determine who's eligible. But because with boxing, the Olympics is running the rules themselves, that's why this has happened this time. So previously, for example, in the athletics, we had this issue with Caster Semenya and with other runners who had what we think is the same DSD, the same disorder of sexual development as these boxers, which is somebody who is born male, has male chromosomes, has internal testes, has male levels of testosterone, and their body responds to it. And in the athletics, it wasn't unsafe, but it was unfair. And now there are rules that those athletes with those conditions cannot compete against women. But in the boxing, the IOC has taken over the boxing regulation from the International Boxing Association, and they have applied a rule that says it's what's on your passport that counts, not your biology.
Maya, you and Sharon and various other commentators fighting for, women's rights in sport have been very vocal about this. And the IOC are basically saying, you, by saying what you're saying, are stigmatising these two boxers. Khalif and Lynn is the other one. What would you say to that?
I think it comes back to the IOC. It's the IOC that have stigmatised these boxers by not having clear rules and clear, fair rules and enforcing them. It shouldn't be playing out on social media like this. It shouldn't be playing out in the public eye. What should happen is there should be clear, fair rules. There should be sex testing, which means a cheek swab. It's easy. It's not invasive. And it does mean that male athletes will not be able to compete in the female category. But, most people don't get to compete in the Olympics. And if, in sports where there are weight categories, if you're over the weight limit, you don't get to compete. It would just simply mean that they're not able to compete. But it doesn't play out in social media. It doesn't play out in this controversial way. It's just those are the rules and they should be enforced. But at the moment, for the IOC in boxing, those are not the rules. The rules they have are, if your passport says female, we will consider you female, even if you have a male body and producing testosterone at male levels.
Maya, as you say, it's a very simple swab test to prove genetically whether you're male or female. The IOC are saying no one wants to return to sex testing. But surveys have consistently shown that the vast majority of female athletes want this brought in. Certainly at the 1996 Olympic Games at Atlanta, 82% of those surveyed were in favour. You think for the next Olympics that this has to change?
I think so. I think what's happened here has been a travesty. It's been unfair. It's been unsafe. It's put female athletes at risk, and they can't do this again.
The defeated boxers have been urged, female chromosome-wise, have been urged to take legal action against the IOC or the XY boxers they are fighting. What do you think to that?
If I were them, I would definitely take advice.
Indeed, because I mean, Sharon has been very vocal on it, and she says that someone is going to get seriously hurt if this continues, and you would certainly echo those thoughts.
Yes, and like Angela Carini, she stopped the fight because it was unsafe. At some point, you have to put your safety ahead of the competition. So I just hope that the women who fight in the finals come out safely.
Indeed. Maya Fossata, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate your time talking about the controversy that has dogged the boxing. Thank you very much, Maya. Great to see you this afternoon. Now we move on. The number of people who applied to come to the UK fell by more than a third in July. Are we finally getting a grip on the migrant crisis, or is something else going on here? I'm Daubney. This is GB News, Britain's news channel. See you soon.
Hi Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Jubes and Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
You'll relate to this one. We've all been there, haven't we? Tensions high in the car as you head off on the latest adventure or holiday during the summer break.
Now, with the average family set to spend about 3.5 hours a week together in the car driving on the roads during the holidays, new research has shown that our relationships could be tested to the limit.
Yes, figures show that 21% are having arguments for simple things like the driver going the wrong way, which we were saying is not actually very simple. That's very serious.
I was going to say that. I'm surprised it's just 21%. Yes. If I was going the wrong way down the road,
you'd know about
You'd hear from me.
A further 20% squabbling over how their partner drives, yes, and 25% admitting to being more prone to rowing when their kids are misbehaving. It's a lot to deal with, isn't it?
Fair enough.
Well, we're joined now by dating and relationship coach and author Persia Lawson. Good to see you this morning, Persia. What is it about being in a car that just makes things so tense?
Well, I think it's probably quite obvious, isn't it? It's the fact that we are in a confined space, we can't go anywhere, and it can just really create so much tension and stress, especially if you and your other half or a family member, whoever you're in the car with, are going through a little bit of a tricky time. And if it's really hot outside, that doesn't help either. So inevitably, it creates a lot of irritation and bickering, I would say, from my experience.
And what is it about children? If you add children into the mix, it just makes things very, very difficult, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, because there's a lot of, are we there yet?
Yeah.
Kicking the back seat and just squabbles, kicking the siblings. So adding children into the mix is just going to turn the heat up on that tension.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled. Lovely.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Good news, double good news, right? Well, actually treble good news because I'm Dawn Neeson and I'm on GB News talking to you, which is really good news. However, the Your Say system is now working properly, so please get on there and have your say. And even better news, migrant numbers have fallen sharply. What's going on here then? After the last Conservative government curbed family visas, probably something to do with it, the number of foreign workers and students applying to come to our country has decreased by 1/3 over the last 12 months. But could this help Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer meet his promise to reduce sky-high levels of net migration? And how much of it is to do with him, or is it to do with what Rishi Sunak was doing beforehand? Let's get to the bottom of all this with Research Director at the Centre for Migration Control, Robert Bates. Robert, thank you very much for joining us. Right, OK, migration levels are falling. This sounds like good news. But what's really going on here?
Well, you're right to say that the measures that the former Conservative government introduced are the reason behind this fall. I think a large part of that was them simply unwinding a problem of their own creation and, you know, picking the low-hanging fruit, essentially, with the clamping down on migrants being able to bring over family members. I think anyone with any common sense would struggle to make the case that it's sensible for one care worker to be able to come over to the UK with 3 dependents with them, for instance. I think the problem we face now is we've almost got a sense of Stockholm syndrome, and it was so used to everything being so bad that numbers and the anticipated drop that we're hearing about today is now somehow being treated like it's a triumph, like it's a great bit of news to rejoice over, whereas in actual fact what we're now going to see is a stasis set around the figures of 400, 500,000, whatever it might settle at being, and being told that this is, you know, a dramatic decrease from where things were. And the problem is that now Labour have no real incentive to actually take any further steps over the next 5 years to bring numbers down, because, you know, they've delivered. I suppose they can make the case they've delivered on their promise to bring net migration down. And we've already seen them backtracking on other certain measures, such as the combined family threshold in recent weeks. Vivek Cooper said that she wasn't planning on carrying on with those plans. So I think the problem is now that we're stuck in a position where net migration will settle around 400,000, but there's no impetus and no momentum for things to fall even further.
Oh, right. So I hadn't actually thought about that. So basically, you think they're going to maybe take their foot off the gas now?
Well, of course they will. I mean, the Labour Party are averse to any sense of border control anyway. So I think they've been able to inherit a situation where we have seen a huge drop, and, you know, some of the reporting of it on it today is quite slavish, really. And, you know, we're meant to be absolutely over the moon by this. But I think the simple fact of the matter is that 400,000, even if that was to be what the number settles on, is still far, far too high. And there are countless other avenues of huge migration that need to be clamped down on. Arguably, we need to have a conversation about where the actual salary threshold is for people able to enter the UK at the moment. The Conservative Party have raised it to 38,000 at the end of their administration. Arguably, that needs to be increased to about 50, 55,000 if we really want to bring down migration, make sure that we have a system that's high skill, high pay, rather than what we've got at the moment, which is people able to enter the UK on a salary of about 20,000. And it's, you know, the inevitable consequences that come with that on public services, on wages for British people, on the culture. It's something that I don't think the Labour Party now are going to do anything more on. I think we're stuck with a situation for the next 5 years of 400,000, but we're going to be told that it's fantastic because it's not as bad as it once was.
Yeah, Yvette Cooper has paused the plans to raise the threshold further, hasn't she? So that's one thing that's out the window. The only thing that concerns me here, Robert, is the fact that we do need more care workers in this country. I mean, the care system is on its knees, so we do need more carers. And less students coming over here as well means that universities are not getting the funding they used to get from foreign students coming here. So is that something we should be worried about?
Well, on the care worker point, that's perfectly easy to solve, to be perfectly honest. I mean, we're repeatedly told that young Brits don't want to go into that line of work. It's nonsense. You look at UCAS application statistics, there's high demand still from young Brits wanting to enter that field. The simple fact of the matter is that the care sector at the moment is run by these big companies that aren't prepared to actually invest in the British workforce and instead paying themselves huge dividends. On the university point, I think it's become a bit of a Ponzi scheme, to be perfectly honest with you. I think far too many of our universities are incredibly low grade. They don't actually offer a high value education. What they do simply offer is a visa factory type situation where people are able to get themselves on an undergraduate course to study things like wardrobe design or video game music composition. And then before you know it, thanks to the government, previous government's brilliant graduate visa route as well, they were then able to stay for an additional 2 years. So I think we need to recalibrate and reassess really the argument that immigration is vital for a thriving, proper higher education sector, because at the moment it just seems to be propping up those that are perhaps not reputable institutions.
Robert, very quickly, I know we're running out of time, very, very quickly. A lot of viewers this afternoon are saying, how can you sort out the rioters, but you can't sort out the immigration, processing that as fast? Could you just very quickly explain what you think's going on there?
Well, I think it's an issue of will, isn't it? And it's an issue of where the incentives that the politicians are actually adhering to. I think the incentives for Keir Starmer is to keep European courts of human rights happy, keep international lawyers happy, lefty lawyers and things like that. But they obviously at the same time have the impetus. Sorry,
Robert, thank you very much. That was my fault for asking you that question. I wanted to answer it. But in any case, Alex Werpel with the weather.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good afternoon. Here's your Met Office weather for GB News. Whilst there will be a bit of cloud, a bit of rain around at times tomorrow, it's looking sunnier and hotter for many on Sunday. But for the time being, it is still quite blustery out there, especially across northern parts. There's quite a pressure gradient with an area of low pressure to the north of the UK, and it's this that's driving some breezy conditions. Also, plenty of showers to end the day across parts of Scotland in particular, and some of them could be quite heavy, but rattling through quite quickly because of those brisk winds. Elsewhere, turning largely dry with some clear skies, especially towards the east overnight, but thicker cloud and a bit of rain pushing in from the west. In the west then, temperatures holding up mid to possibly high teens for some of us, a little bit fresher where we have some clearer skies further east. Now, taking a closer look, first thing tomorrow morning and across parts of Scotland, it will still be a bit breezy and there will again be some showers around, perhaps some longer spells of rain for a time, particularly across western Scotland, all of that drifting northeastwards. A few showers perhaps for parts of Northern Ireland and northwest England, a brighter picture for northeast England. Also down the eastern side of England, a good deal of fine sunny weather for some to begin with, but the outbreaks of rain, which could be heavy over the hills towards the west, gradually making their way eastwards as we go through the morning. So for many parts of England and Wales, it is going to be quite a grey day and there will be a bit of rain at times, though it shouldn't be too heavy for most of us. Further north, a slightly brighter picture, similar to today really, some blustery showers rattling through, though the winds not quite as strong. In the north, temperatures getting into the high teens, low 20s, mid 20s for some of us towards the southeast. Later on tomorrow, we will start to see the cloud and any rain across England and Wales drifting away towards the east, so some clearer skies developing as we go through the night, and the showers in the north should start to die out as well. And then Sunday for most is looking fine with a decent amount of sunshine, with temperatures rising as we go into Monday. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Jules Buckley. Clockwise M60 a lane shutting queues. There's emergency repair slow going from the M56 to Princess Parkway, junction 4 to 5. A 6-mile queue northbound up the M5 up towards the M6 at 8. There's all due to a collision there, lane shut. A bump 2 northbound on the M5 around Gloucester, 11A up to 11 and 2 lanes are combed off. Now Essex, big queue southbound for the A12. It's closed off, junction 26 to 25. That's the tollgate interchange down towards Marks Tay. The queue back to the Crown interchange at 29 not helped by an earlier oil spillage. The clockwise M25 long queues too are back over the QE2 bridge. A heavy towards Dartford 1B not helped by an earlier breakdown and bump. And queues in the cones eastbound for the M27 junction 4 to Southampton Airport at junction 5. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Don't miss out on your chance to win a whopping £30,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. It's extra cash that could really make a difference to your coming year. You could find yourself on that holiday you've always wanted to take, buy that treat that always seemed out of reach, or just send some of those day-to-day financial stresses packing. £30,000 could be yours. For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text CASH to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07, PO Box 8690, Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
As time passes,
she could have said Storm.
You made my argument for me.
My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
Went everywhere.
Something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different. Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon. It's 5 o'clock on Friday afternoon. Congratulations, you made it. Nearly the weekend. I'm Dawn Neeson, and I'm not Martin Daubney, because you would spot, well, hopefully you'd spot the difference. At least chromosomally we're different. Now, OK, former Labour councillor Ricky Jones has been charged with encouraging a violent disorder after he was filmed addressing a crowd in Walthamstow on Wednesday night. Meanwhile, more people are being jailed for their involvement in the riots. Tyler Kay has been sentenced to 38 months for stirring up racial hatred. He used social media to call for hotels housing asylum seekers to be set alight, while Jordan Plain has been jailed for 8 months for mocking Muslim prayers and making monkey noises at the riots. And there's the rest of the day's news as well. The BBC has asked Shame former presenter Hugh Edwards to return the money he was paid after he was arrested last year. Good luck. The BBC chairman has branded him a villain who behaved in bad faith. All of that coming up over this next packed hour. But... and it's working now. I want to hear from you. Send your views and post your comments by visiting gbnews.com/your say. But first, hey, it's like 5:01, so I think that's probably time for the news headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Dawn, thank you and good afternoon. The top stories from the GB newsroom. A 30-year-old man has been jailed for 8 months for racially aggravated intentional harassment during the riots in Leeds. The judge said his sentence was reduced to take his guilty plea into account. At one point, Jordan Plain was filmed with others mocking Muslim prayers. Meanwhile, a Facebook user who urged people to attack a Leeds hotel used to house asylum seekers has also been jailed. 28-year-old Jordan Parler has been sentenced to 20 months after pleading guilty to publishing written material intended to stir racial hatred. Meanwhile, 2 men have been sent to prison for an attack on what prosecutors described as pro-EDL protesters after rival demonstrations clashed in Leeds city centre last Saturday. 21-year-old Samir Ali from Leeds and 31-year-old Adnan Ghafoor admitted a fray earlier this week. It comes as the Prime Minister has issued a warning to those using social media to encourage violence and disorder. Visiting the Metropolitan Police Command Centre in central London, Sir Keir Starmer said social media is not a law-free zone. He said the police are actively pursuing those breaking the law online with more swift sentences. The National Police Chiefs Council has said almost 600 arrests have been made in relation to disorder across the country following the Southport stabbing attack. Sir Keir Starmer says those committing offences online are still culpable and will be brought to justice.
Those that are thinking about getting involved in disorder of any sort is very clear. If you involve yourself in disorder, then the full force of the law will be applied. And the fact that we've seen this week people not just in court but being sentenced to significant terms of custody for their behaviour just a few days ago, I think is a very important message to anyone who's thinking of getting involved in the coming days.
Meanwhile, former Labour councillor Ricky Jones has been charged with encouraging violent disorder. It's after he was filmed addressing a crowd at a London demonstration on Wednesday evening. That, coming from the Crown Prosecution Service, he is appearing at Westminster's Magistrates' Court today. A man who swore at a police officer before kicking him amid disorder in central London has been sentenced. 20-year-old Ozzy Cush swore at officers responding to widespread disorder in Westminster on Wednesday, the 31st of July. Officers with the Metropolitan Police were walking along Whitehall in the direction of Trafalgar Square, informing demonstrators that a dispersal order was in force and encouraging people to leave the area. Taking exception to their presence, Cush was recorded walking across the path of the officers before sticking his middle finger towards them and kicking an officer. Several police forces have issued further CCTV appeals to identify suspects they believe to have been responsible for some of the violence and disorder. Detectives investigating riots in Merseyside issued images of 11 people after a separate appeal helped identify individuals earlier this week. Greater Manchester Police have issued a similar appeal for information. They're asking the public to contact them directly or contact Crime Stoppers if they recognise any of the people pictured here. In other news, disgraced former BBC News presenter Hugh Edwards has been asked to return his salary by the corporation's board. It comes after the 62-year-old admitted in court last week to having indecent images of children. 7 of the 41 images were described as being in the most serious category of child abuse pictures and videos. The BBC's board has told him to repay his salary from the time he was arrested in November last year, saying the presenter undermined trust in the BBC and brought it into disrepute. Hugh Edwards has resigned from 2 honorary positions at his former university in Wales. Former US President Donald Trump has agreed to debate Vice President Kamala Harris on television in the race to the White House. It's been confirmed the Republican nominee will debate his Democratic rival on the 10th of September on the US network ABC. And Trump told a news conference at his Florida home last night that he would also want to add 2 more debates on Fox News and NBC. During his news conference, Mr. Trump claimed his opponent wasn't intellectually up to the challenge. And former reality TV star Katie Price has appeared in court today after being arrested at Heathrow Airport last night. It comes after a judge issued a warrant following her failure to attend a High Court bankruptcy hearing last month. Price was declared bankrupt in November 2019 and again in March this year. Ms. Price is expected to attend a further hearing later this month. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much, Tatiana. Right, OK, we're going to start with, well, the biggest story in town, the only one that is not going away, is it? The crackdown on rioters that have shamed Britain. And former Labour councillor Ricky Jones, that's him there, has appeared in court this afternoon. He's been charged with encouraging violent disorder after he was filmed saying rioters are disgusting and should have their throats cut, complete with the throat-cutting gesture. Meanwhile, father of 3, Tyler Kay, has been jailed for 38 months for stirring up racial hatred. He used social media platform X to call for hotels housing asylum seekers to be set alight. And 28-year-old Jordan Parler from Leeds was sentenced to 20 months in prison for publishing written material intended to stir up racial hatred. Lots of stuff to talk about, which is why I'm very, very glad that I've got the lovely Christopher Hope with me, GB News political supremo, I think we should call you. I like that title. Christopher, look, we've seen people being sentenced today. Are Labour thinking they are doing a good job with the way they are controlling this situation?
Labour's been in charge for 1 month or 5 weeks. This would test any government, I think, even one in charge for 14 years. It certainly tested the Tory party back in 2011 when there were 6 times as many arrests. But this is a challenge to any new government. They've got their own ideas of what they want to do. They've got their plans for this week. Get Keir Starmer on the road doing a speech and the rest of it, or getting other things happening. But instead, they are dealing with real-time threats to public order. And I think after, a slow start, they have got to grips with it. You've got Sir Keir Starmer, I think, using his experience as being the Director of Public Prosecutions to get all the things working in the right order.
You think that's coming into play?
I think arrests are happening, charging, guilty pleas, people in prison by the end of the week. That is record time. That shows and demonstrates, and we're showing on our clips there on our news bulletins, why people are just being banged up for being online, encouraging things which and then also being involved in riots themselves. They're not out of the woods yet, but as things stand, he's got to grips with it, which is the first challenge you've got as Prime Minister: keep us all safe. He had 3 meetings so far of the Cobra group of top aides. He met last night. He did say last night that the police are now on a high alert this weekend. He's also been with Sir Mark Rowley. He's a top police bod in this country, and did say some words earlier which are worth repeating now.
I think it's really important that we maintain high alert. I've obviously been here at the control room of the Met looking at what's essentially the nerve centre, but my message to the police and all of those that are charged with responding to disorder is maintain that high alert. I'm absolutely convinced that having the police officers in place these last few days in the right places, the swift justice that's being dispensed in our courts, have had a real impact. But we have to stay on high alert going into this weekend, because we absolutely have to make sure that our communities are safe and secure and feel safe and secure.
So Keir Starmer there at Met Police headquarters here in London. He also said that social media is not a law-free zone, that you say things on there, it will have consequences, and we're seeing that in the sentencing.
We've seen that straight away, haven't we?
Today. The harder challenge, I think, for Sir Keir Starmer is how to address the causes of this, how to go after what happened here, not justifying any of the rioting. We can't do that, and we will not do that, and no one should do that at all. No one should do that. But it's about the people who demonstrated not riot, but demonstrated, are concerned about immigration. And I think the initial start of the 9 days of trouble, when he talked about the far right, did make our viewers and listeners cross at GB News and other people, because being concerned about migration doesn't mean that you're far right. Craig McKinley, the former Tory MP for South Thanet, lost his arms and his legs to sepsis, shortly to be enter the House of Lords as Lord McKinley. He was on my podcast, Chopper's Political Podcast, overnight, and he made this very point in very clear terms. And here he is.
Following the riot since those dreadful killings in Southport last week, Craig McKinley, are you comfortable about the blame on the far right? A lot of viewers, listeners to GB News are concerned about the idea that the government's been willing to say it's just the far right, and that almost says if you're worried about immigration, it's a far right issue. And of course, as we know, it's a wider issue and a deeper issue than just one held by some thugs on the far right.
Well, I mean, if the far right are that good at organising things, then they're far better at organising things than any political party or government that I know in the UK. So I actually don't believe fully. I mean, there's always going to be some nutters, and they should be dealt with very robustly, and they should be in prison where appropriate. I'm fully in favour of all of that. But if you look at some of these, rallies that are going on, there are lots of couples on these rallies that you'd expect to go and see in the Dog and Duck on a Friday afternoon. These are normal people, and I think what happened with Southport, it's sort of culminated what I feel is a deep malaise in this country, a deep worry. And it sort of brought it together in an unexpected way. And I'm afraid that's how things often happen. You know, it's like the butterfly wings in Brazil create a storm in Africa. You know, this is almost one of those moments where I think a lot of people have said, forget what the Southport was actually all about. It actually made people rather annoyed about the state of Britain today. I mean, I was so upset about that Southport incident.
The challenge there from Craig McKinley, Lord McKinley, can the Labour government address the concerns felt by so many about immigration, notwithstanding the dreadful violence, and that it should be dealt with by the courts? Just finally, also, don't forget, this government is going to start releasing prisoners early after serving just 40% of their time inside, not 50%. And that means that many rioters who have been jailed in recent days could be released early. The longest term has been 3 years so far. 30 months and 20 months, those individuals could be released early under the government's own policy. So there could be some controversy down the line.
Yeah, there's a lot of controversy, and a lot of people on here saying, Christopher, that basically when is Sir Keir Starmer going to start engaging with all communities, not just some communities? And I think that is...
That is, in a nutshell, the challenge this government faces.
Yeah. Mr Hope, thank you very much. A pleasure to have you in the studio joining me. Nice company, thank you very much. Now, let's cross over to Belfast, where similar things are going on. Protesters are gathering, and our Northern Ireland reporter, Doogie Beattie, is there for us. Doogie, good afternoon. What's going on where you are?
Well, good afternoon and welcome to Belfast City Centre. Yes, two protests starting here. One at the back end there, which is all for immigration, and one's here, which is really against immigration. Now, just to let you see how this works, the ones here for anti-immigrants are all from working class areas. There's very small numbers of them, but if we just look at these police officers sitting here, full riot gear, absolutely ready to go, and there is very, very small numbers. And this is why these communities are really telling me about two-tier policing. And if we come along, if you could just get my cameraman to come this side with me, and now you can see there's probably about 100 protesters on that side, full TSG, absolutely ready for trouble. We go round here and we look at these riot Land Rovers, snatch Land Rovers that are here, and then we walk over to what is mainly public sector workers on this side, and there are hundreds of them here, absolutely hundreds of them, and you can see very clearly that there is no police with riot gear on this side. These are all ordinary dressed police officers. These protesters all have bibs on them. They are very well funded, very well organised, and that in itself is the lack of political leadership in the other side. This is the problem that's really hitting the streets of Britain, throughout Britain, because this is your public sector workers, all the unions on this side, and down the other side, Stevie, you can just go back here, we just go back down in, we can see the amazing amount of police really ready to have, in case anything cracks off and starts to go. But people are swelling here on the other side. There is now quite a few coming through, and numbers are swelling there. We'll be over this within the next hour or so.
Brilliant, thank you very much. That's Doogie BT in Northern Ireland for us on the similar situation with people protesting. Thank you very much, Doogie. Now, as Labour crack down on violent disorder, will the writers they've just jailed be released early? Reports suggest protesters jailed for less than 4 years could benefit from the government's plans to deal with overcrowding in prisons. But the Ministry of Justice say 500 new prison cells have been made available. Where from? Not sure. And are waiting for anyone involved in what they're calling thuggery. We're joined now by former prison and social campaigner Winston Davies. Thank you very much for coming in to joining me in the studio. It's a bit cold and lonely in here. Winston, what do you make of how this is being handled so far? I mean, as far as I was aware, we were down to the last sort of like 600 prison spaces in the country.
Yeah.
Now, suddenly, there is all these prison spaces available.
Yeah.
What's it sound like to you going on here?
I mean, look, I've been on many times talking about a shortage of prison spaces, and then all of a sudden, we've got spaces.
Yes.
Before the riots kicked off, they brought in the 40% release time to ease the burden that was left from the last government. I think they've just said that they've got 2 new prisons. They've got 2 new wings that they're going to create space in, 500 places from H&P Stockton, I think I read on one of them, and somewhere else. Listen, desperate measures. I mean, they need to be seen to be being robust to curb the people coming out, and people are going to think twice about putting things online. People are going to think twice about going out to protest or to riot. But it's a tough one.
Do you think it is having an effect? I mean, we were threatened with more riots on Wednesday. That didn't happen. Whether they were actually it was just a social media scam that was going on, or whether they were really going to happen. But do you think the way Sir Keir Starmer and Labour are treating this, it is having an effect on people thinking twice?
I think we are all thinking about it, because they said whether it was a hoax or misinformation on Wednesday or not, the big test is going to be the next few days.
Yeah.
If they don't come out, or people don't come out protesting and kicking off again, then realistically, is it going to resurge itself in another week or 2? Probably not. So at the moment, if they're going to do it, it's going to be now. But the underlying issues aren't going away. The underlying issues, I wrote about it yesterday, the working class being marginalised, not being taken seriously, underfunded, not being felt represented for decades now, that's not going away. That needs to be addressed.
I'm so glad you said that, Winston, because you are echoing what so many of our viewers and listeners are saying today. It's like, we have seen Sir Keir Starmer engaging with communities, but the biggest community out there who are feeling completely ignored, they're not getting any engagement.
But again, Dawn, I said I understand why they would be frustrated. I said I'm a working class man. I understand what it means to need and to want and to feel like you're not something not good enough almost, right?
Yeah.
And the fact is that until they start, speaking to those people, what's going to change? That is the problem.
How do you think they should go about it? What's the best thing they could do?
Do you know what? Put your money where your mouth is.
Yeah.
Put your money where your mouth is. You shut down all of the industry, the factories, the mines, the lack of opportunities, they sold off all the housing. Put your money where your mouth is. They said, I think there was levelling up, let's get some more money, talking about all these, the northern places of the country, let's start sending some money up there. It's like London's like the economic centre of the whole of the country. Oh, actually, do you know what? Let's spread it out. Let's share that out. But I said what I was writing about is that a lot I understand the frustration. I think it's directed at the wrong place, and it's intentionally been directed at the wrong place.
Yeah.
The governments that for decades have been lining their pockets, lining the pockets of their friends, and all the while. People are sitting there saying we haven't got enough spaces to go to schools for our doctors, for our nurses, but it's been squeezed from somewhere.
Yeah, no, you're right, absolutely. And again, a lot of people are saying when they want to do something, they can do it,
100%.
as we have seen with suddenly the judicial system working very fast.
100%.
Prison places are available.
100%.
And people are confused by that. It's like, well, why can they do that now, but they can't sort out, say, the immigration before, and we've got migrants in hotels. Why couldn't they sort that out?
Well, they stopped processing migrant applications. They just stopped doing it. And it goes back to, talk about the whole prison problem with the prisons. 30 years ago, they started this private prison trial. Now 1 in 7 of our prisons are housed in a privately run prison. Who is making the money from those privately run prisons? Not the normal people. Not normal people. No. But we pay for it with our taxes. While the shareholders of them prisons, they make the money. And the last government increased prison sentences 50% from 2012 to 2022. So they're increasing it for longer, keep people locked up for longer. Yeah, it's going to put a strain on it. What's the answer? Build more private prisons. Who's going to get the money? Shareholders.
Exactly. Winston, just quickly, we are running out of time. How optimistic are you that we've seen as a country the last of the riots?
I would hope that it's going to be a turning point. I'd hope that enough people have had their say. The people, and again, last thing on this, the people that have gone out and created all the craziness and got arrested and gone. The fans of hate have been flamed, and they've gone out and taken extreme action. And all of a sudden, you get certain people, certain publications turn around and say, actually no, let's cut ties with them. They're expendable.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you very much for coming in and joining me. That's Winston Davis, a former prisoner and social campaigner, talking a lot of sense, echoing a lot of what you're saying out there. So do keep those messages coming. Winston, thank you very much. Now, I'm going to get the latest on the retired British doctor who's gone missing in the French Pyrenees. Tom Doherty sent his family messages on Tuesday asking them for help, saying he couldn't move. Intriguing story, this one. I'm Dawn Neeson. This is GB News, Britain's news channel. Don't go too far. Loads more coming up for you. See you soon.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Did you ever flirt with the idea of going to America?
I've twice happened to me. Once I was offered in Canada the job of a weatherman.
Oh.
Yeah, I was offered that. And I just sort of thought of it, what is the point where your mother, your father would never see you on TV? What's the point of doing it if nobody knows you on it, So I thought...
Big money, though, even for a weatherman.
I did, yeah, it was more than a weather job, but I said no, basically. And then I went and I did this quiz show for Fox TV.
Oh.
Yeah, they said, we want the Irish guy that does the lottery. I think they meant Dermot O'Leary or something. They ended up, they got me and I couldn't believe it. And I went over to do a daytime version of this. And then 3 days into it, they changed everything and they said, this is so good, we're putting this out in the evening. And I remember phoning my wife and saying, we're going to have to move out to California.
Oh, wow.
They really want me here, and I'm going down. You know that street with all the palm trees in it, whatever. That's the way I was going to work, in this limo and whatever. And I had a bungalow there and a golf cart. It was absolutely incredible. Anyway, I'll cut this very long story short. So I'm working really, really bad. A lot of very ignorant people, it has to be said. And really have one regret in my life that I didn't punch a guy when I was out there. I really would have, if I had my life to live again, I would have really satisfiedly been sacked for punching this git. But basically, anyway, they put the show out. One episode of the show went out and it came fourth in its rating. So it was behind Lost, it was behind The Biggest Loser, there was something else there.
Fair enough.
Fair enough, and it came fourth, and that was it. It disappeared. 36 shows or so disappeared. Disappeared, never to be shown again.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Okoye, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled.
Lovely. Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Well, that was a fascinating chat with Winston there. Thank you, wasn't it? Right, I'm Dawn Neeson. This is GB News. Now, later this hour, I'll have the latest from day 14 already of the Paris Olympics, where Katarina Johnson-Thompson, amazing, love her, could win a gold medal this evening. But before we get to that, let's talk about a retired British doctor who has gone missing in the French Pyrenees. He sent a final message to his family saying he had fallen over and could not move. His last known location was Etong de Conta, and he is presumed to be close to Ari Edge in the Occitane region. As searches intensify, Tom Docherty's family is urgently appealing for help. Joining me now to bring us up to speed on this story is French journalist and columnist Anne-Elisabeth Moutet. Anne-Elisabeth, thank you very much for joining me. We hear a lot of these stories about people going out in the wilderness, going for walks. I mean, Dr. Michael Mosley was one in Greece. What's the latest on this story?
Unfortunately, not much more. The police, of course, are circling in the gendarmerie, and they've started sort of going in the area where he was supposed to be. It's semi-mountainous. It's in the southwest of France. He sent a WhatsApp to his family, and then there were no more messages, but it's entirely possible he's out of battery. But still, it is worrisome, and we don't know anymore. There was very bad weather with storms yesterday, so it was impossible to keep looking. Not yesterday, but the 7th, because he's disappeared since the 6th of August, since Tuesday. On the 7th, it was very difficult to look for him. They are still trying to look for him, but there's not much more right now with the local gendarmerie, and they've even sent helicopters, and so far no trace.
And Elizabeth, what is this area like? Is it, you know, are there hiking trails through there, or is it a fairly remote area of the Pyrenees?
It's definitely, it's got hiking trails, but you know, I mean, France is a very large country. This is at the bottom of the Pyrenees. It's not the great heights of the Pyrenees, but you know, it's the I couldn't walk up all this. It's pretty steep. He was used to walking, from what we gather. And therefore, it was not something that was impossible for him physically. But if he said that he fell and he was injured, then that changes everything.
No, indeed. Very worrying times. And obviously, it's a very popular area with hikers and campers. And so there are people out and about, but there's been no sign of him.
Yes, again, it's a very large area. It's not a small area, and so it's not impossible to be in this area and not see people for several hours. So that's not that's not always helpful. The only hope is that even if he's out of a battery, there's a possibility of still finding a signal. But how much of a signal and how weak that may be, nobody knows. And I'm really sorry not to have more news. From an hour ago, nothing new.
Right, and his family are out there as well, are they, waiting for news?
They are. They know the region. They are waiting for him. They are in connection with the police, and we don't know much more than that.
Right, OK. Thank you very much for bringing us up to date on that story. And hopefully it will have a happy ending. But, you know, we have had these stories this year already, haven't we? And that's Anne-Elizabeth Boutet. Thank you very much for joining us. Right, now, there's loads more coming up between now and 6 o'clock. My God, the afternoon's flying. I'll get reaction to the big development in the Hugh Edwards saga. Yes, saga indeed. The BBC has asked him to return his salary from the time he was arrested in November. Good luck with that one. But first, let's get the latest news headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Dawn, thank you very much. The top stories this hour. Former Labour councillor Ricky Jones has been remanded in custody after appearing in court on charges of encouraging violent disorder at a rally organised by Stand Up to Racism. Jones was filmed addressing a crowd at the London demonstration on Wednesday evening. 57-year-old Ricky Jones was charged at Westminster Magistrates' Court, which heard he gave a speech to a crowd which was capable of encouraging or assisting the commission of violent disorder. Plea and trial preparation has been set for the 6th of September. A 30-year-old man has been jailed for 8 months for racially aggravated intentional harassment during the riots in Leeds. The judge said his sentence was reduced to take his guilty plea into account. At one point, Jordan Plain was filmed with others mocking Muslim prayers. And a Facebook user who urged people to attack a Leeds hotel used to house asylum seekers has also been jailed today. 28-year-old Jordan Parler has been sentenced to 20 months after pleading guilty to publishing written material intended to stir racial hatred. Meanwhile, 2 men have been sent to prison for an attack on what prosecutors described as pro-EDL protesters after rival demonstrations clashed in Leeds city centre last Saturday. 21-year-old Samir Ali from Leeds and 31-year-old Adnan Ghaffar admitted a fray earlier this week. It comes as the Prime Minister has issued a warning to those using social media to encourage violence and disorder. Visiting the Metropolitan Police Command Centre in central London, Sir Keir Starmer said social media is not a law-free zone. He said the police are actively pursuing those breaking the law online with more swift sentences. The National Police Chiefs Council has said 595 arrests have been made in relation to disorder across the country following Southport stabbing. And disgraced former BBC News presenter Hugh Edwards has been asked to return his salary by the corporation's board. It comes after the 62-year-old admitted in court last week to having indecent images of children. 7 of the 41 images were described as being in the most serious category of child abuse pictures and videos. The BBC's board has told him to repay his salary from the time he was arrested in November last year, saying the presenter undermined trust in the BBC and brought it into disrepute. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much, Tatiana. And doesn't she look gorgeous in that orange? You know, there's not a single colour that Tatiana doesn't look lovely in. Very annoying. Now, for an update on the suspended Labour councillor Ricky Jones, who was charged, we're joined by our reporter Charlie Peters, who is outside Westminster Magistrates' Court with this breaking story. Charlie, right, bring us up to date. What's going on?
So Ricky Jones, that suspended Labour councillor, has now been remanded into custody here at Westminster Magistrates' Court. Just in the last 10 minutes, the judge, Tan Ikram, made that decision after hearing from both the prosecution, the Crown, and Mr Jones's solicitor in their hearings here. The first hearing on charges, on allegations that Mr. Jones was encouraging violent disorder at an anti-fascist rally on Wednesday evening in Walthamstow, where the prosecution said that Mr. Jones was filmed conducting a cutting motion across his neck as he said, "We need to cut their throats," referring to what he described as Nazi fascists. Now, the prosecutor, Adrita Ahmed, said that in regards to the current environment of disorder across the country, these were dangerous remarks. Now, in response, Mr. Jones's solicitor, Hussein Zahir KC, said that Mr. Jones is a family man. He referred to his deep roots and links within the community. He's from Dartford in Kent, where he is a suspended Labour councillor, suspended by the Labour Party yesterday. And he also went on to say that he has children and grandchildren within the community. He has been committed to his community over many, many years. And Mr. Zahir added that he was wholly committed to the welfare of others without the expression of any sort of prejudice at all. But after hearing from both the Crown and the Defence solicitor, Judge Tanakram did go on to say that I'm told that while Mr. Jones is an elected politician and in a position of leadership, he said that in a time of widespread tension, he uttered words that demonstrated a complete lack of judgment. And addressing Mr. Jones in the dock, he said, "The disorder is at risk of continuing. I have no confidence that in the midst of heightened tension, you would not demonstrate such a lack of judgment again." And in doing so, he did remand Mr. Jones, Ricky Jones, that suspended Labour councillor, into custody until the next stage of these legal proceedings, which will be the 6th of September at the Inner London Crown Court for the plea hearing and trial preparation.
That's great. Thank you very much, Charlie Peters, bringing us up to date now on the Labour councillor who did that slit throat thing. Thank you very much, Charlie. Right, OK, it's 5:30. It's nearly Friday night, people, and nearly your weekend. So let's take a quick break now, but there's loads more coming up, so don't get too far just yet.
Good afternoon. Here's your Met Office weather for GB News. Whilst there will be a bit of cloud, a bit of rain around at times tomorrow, it's looking sunnier and hotter for many on Sunday. But for the time being, it is still quite blustery out there, especially across northern parts. There's quite a pressure gradient with an area of low pressure to the north of the UK, and it's this that's driving some breezy conditions. Also, plenty of showers to end the day across parts of Scotland in particular, and some of them could be quite heavy, but rattling through quite quickly because of those brisk winds. Elsewhere, turning largely dry with some clear skies, especially towards the east overnight, but thicker cloud and a bit of rain pushing in from the west. In the west, then, temperatures holding up mid to possibly high teens for some of us. A little bit fresher where we have some clearer skies further east. Now, taking a closer look, first thing tomorrow morning and across parts of Scotland, it will still be a bit breezy and there will again be some showers around, perhaps some longer spells of rain for a time, particularly across western Scotland, all of that drifting northeastwards. A few showers perhaps for parts of Northern Ireland and northwest England, a brighter picture for northeast England. Also down the eastern side of England, a good deal of fine sunny weather for some to begin with, but the outbreaks of rain, which could be heavy over the hills towards the west, gradually making their way eastwards as we go through the morning. So for many parts of England and Wales, it is going to be quite a grey day and there will be a bit of rain at times, though it shouldn't be too heavy for most of us. Further north, a slightly brighter picture, similar to today really, some blustery showers rattling through, though the wind's not quite as strong. In the north, temperatures getting into the high teens, low 20s, mid 20s for some of us towards the southeast. Later on tomorrow, we will start to see the cloud and any rain across England and Wales drifting away towards the east. So some clearer skies developing as we go through the night, and the showers in the north should start to die out as well. And then Sunday for most is looking fine with a decent amount of sunshine, with temperatures rising as we go into Monday. Bye-bye.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. Queues in Greater Manchester, just off the M56, the clockwise M60, junction 4 to 5. A lane shut for emergency repair, still causing queues that one. A westbound A14 Cambridgeshire at the turn off for the A1 junction 22. Now, 2 lanes are out. There's queues back to Boxworth at 24 at the scene of a collision. It's also looking slow on the eastbound side as well. Clockwise, QE2 Bridge. This is the M25. A lane shut for a breakdown. Big queues to about 3 miles before Lakeside. at junction 30, slow anti-clock as well. Southbound A12 away from the tollgate interchange 26 towards 25 marks Tays Close, queuing back to 29 a spillage there, and the westbound M29 Ashford towards Leeds Castle 8 a lane blocked very slow there. There's a breakdown. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Welcome back. Sorry, caught me reading all your messages. And there's loads coming in now. The system has righted itself, so keep them coming in. I'm Dawn Neeson, and this is indeed GB News. Now, the BBC and your money, because it is your money, remember. The BBC is asking Hugh Edwards to return more than £200,000 as they accuse him of acting in bad faith. The board say he's undermined trust by taking his wage since his arrest in November, despite knowing he'd plead guilty to 3 counts of making indecent images of children. Joining us now is former BBC producer and editor John Mayer. John, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. John, right, OK, the BBC know what was going on with Hugh for quite a while, it has to be said, and now they think he's going to hand the money back. What do you reckon the chances are on this one?
Hi, Dawn. Look, this has been a double failure. Hugh Edwards, when he was arrested, should have said to the BBC, look, I'm suspended at the moment. I won't take my wage. And what the BBC should have done was put the money into a suspense account and said, look, your wages are going into a suspense account. If you get found innocent, you have the money. If you plead guilty, then we get the money. Now that seemed to be very simple. Instead of which, they continued shelling out public dosh. And this is where the board has been absolutely right today to say to Hugh Edwards, look, you took money, you were arrested, you weren't charged, and you should pay it back. Now, trouble is that Director General Tim Davies is surrounded by HR people, lawyers. He's not surrounded by any journalists who say to him, look, this is playing very badly. What you should do is actually put it into a suspense account. That's it. But it's, it seemed very simple to me. And will he return it? Well, I don't know, because he's probably lawyered up to his hilt. And would his lawyers allow it? Who knows? But he's got a moral duty to return it, I would have thought.
But we all know what it's like when you've got money, John. It's like, we all live to our means, and it's like, if you've been paid that money, you will probably have done something. The thing is with Tim Davie, what I don't understand here, John, is how can he not understand the situation? How can he not understand how badly this is playing out with the public and giving more voice to those people that constantly shout, defund the BBC?
I don't know. I mean, as I said, Tim surrounds himself with HR people, PR people. He doesn't surround himself with people who think this isn't going to play well. Now, Director Generals always have somebody who's a flat catcher, or should do. Mark Thompson had a man called Mark Byford, and their job is to catch the flack and say, don't do this, because this will happen. He doesn't have that sort of person. It was obvious that he was going to bring the corporation into disrepute, and that's in his contract. So what was the problem? Just suspend him and put his money into a suspense bank account and pay it out when and if. It's been a failure all along, actually. From the moment that young man's stepfather walked into BBC Wales and said, "I'm worried about my son who's getting messages from Hugh Edwards offering 35,000." The BBC complaint system failed again. They do need to look very, very seriously at this, and anybody who's involved in any of this should actually assistant head should roll in this case.
John, I mean, it's not like the BBC haven't been here before, obviously, with Jimmy Savile. They are accused of, to a certain extent, trying to cover up what has been going on with the Hugh Edwards case. I mean, what would you say to that?
I don't think they cover up. The BBC they're like an armadillo. They put a shell over themselves and hope that any stuff coming in will just bounce off it. They should be much more proactive. And one thing, by the way, all of Hugh Edwards' archive, leave it right there. He's actually done the work. He was there and he won the awards. Leave them right there. This is not Stalin. This is not Trotsky. Hugh Edwards has done the work. Whatever he's done in his private life, leave the archive there. The idea of cancelling the archive is such nonsense.
That's interesting. Why do you say that?
I said, because look, we don't live in a Stalinist society. You know, we can't abolish Trotsky. We can't abolish Hugh Edwards. He did the work. He did the work very well. You know, he read the news. He did the general elections. Did the state occasions. So you know, he did it as a professional. What he did in his private life, well, you know, that's to be. But you know, if he's tainted, so what? Leave the archive there. You cannot cancel people.
But this isn't a victimless crime, is it? I mean, there are families out there whose children have been involved in this.
I agree. But, you know, and we should have all sympathy for them. But, you know, that doesn't mean you destroy the man's professional work. He did a professional job for 30, 40 years, leave his work where it is. He won awards galore for it. He was very good.
OK, and finally, I mean, where does this leave the future of the BBC? Obviously, you know, the defund the BBC, stop paying the licence fee, now very vocal once again. Does the BBC have a future?
Of course it does. Of course it does. And the BBC board and BBC chairman today was being very proactive in saying, look, we live or die by trust. And, you know, the BBC lives or dies by that. And it's acted very honourably today. And what the BBC needs to do now is just make bloody good programmes. Look at the Olympics. Look at other programmes they make. Makes good programmes, and when people will pay for it. But it does need to think about the licence fee and how that might be changed for modern circumstances. Maybe with an element of subscription using the iPlayer as a barrier.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for joining us. That's John Mayer, a former BBC producer there, to talk about the Hugh Edwards situation and the fact that the BBC hope to get £200,000 that they paid him back. Good luck. Now, Katarina Johnson-Thompson needs to produce one of the best runs of her life to win Olympic gold in the heptathlon this evening. I'll round up the day 14 events of the Paris Games coming up next. I'm Dawn Neeson. This is GB News, Britain's news channel. Don't go too far. See you soon.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
The Duke and Duchess of Sussex have announced a tour to Colombia at the invitation of Vice President Francia Márquez. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle are expected to highlight the threat posed to children by the internet. Why they have to go to Colombia to do that, I'm not entirely sure. However, this is literally within a week of saying that Harry saying he can't come to London. He doesn't feel it's safe to bring his wife, Meghan, to London because, he fears for her personal safety. And Colombia, to my reckoning, is one of those countries where the government advise you not to even go. In any case, joining me now is royal broadcaster and commentator Rafe Hedder-Mancu to explain what's going on here. Rafe, hello, lovely to see you.
Hello, lovely as always. A bit of comic relief here. Yes, so you're quite right. Literally just days after Prince Harry declared that he couldn't bring his wife to Britain because of the potential risk of an acid attack or knife attack, they've now announced that they're going to go to Colombia, one of the world's 10 most dangerous countries. Right. A nation riven with political assassinations, with murder, with kidnappings and gun crime. I mean, the hypocrisy is mind-boggling. And it just comes a few months after they went on another trip to Nigeria, another world leader in murder and political kidnappings. Now, look, no one is saying that they're going to be putting themselves into harm's way. They're going there at the invitation of this radically left-wing government. And, of course, we've had successful royal tours of Colombia in the past. Just last year, Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh, went to Colombia. 10 years ago, our current King and Queen also had a successful trip to Colombia. But that's rather the point. If members of the royal family are able to go to the world's most dangerous nations, the idea that they can't come to the UK because it's too dangerous is simply absurd.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect And then you throw me into the mix, and trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. God, we're in the home straight, as it were, which brings us very neatly to the Olympics. I'm joined now by... Are we day 14 now already? God, it's gone fast. I'm joined now by Chris Scudder to bring us up to date on what's going on, because I think we're doing quite well. Chris, hello, lovely. Thank you for joining me. Now, Katarina Johnson-Thompson, I'm in awe of this. I mean, she's actually pulling all the stops out this time around, isn't she? So bring us up to date on what's going on day 14, is it?
She is, yeah. Just before I do that, breaking news. We've just got another silver medal just minutes ago. It's come on the cyclists on the track cycling. It's a massively long event, the Madison. It is Eleanor Barker and Nia Evans. They were the world champions. They were just beaten by the Italians. In fact, they just got up from bronze to silver on the very last couple of laps. Eleanor Barker did, so well done to them. Always rely on the cyclists. They haven't got as many golds yet as they maybe ought to have got, but that's 3 silvers now, a couple of bronze, a gold as well, and Jack Carlin's going for a bronze in the next half hour as well. So that's breaking. So silver medal for Britain in the women's Madison.
Well done
to them. Yeah, indeed. Catherine, KJT is what a storied career. As we were saying yesterday, she's won everything except an Olympic medal. She always, every time you see her, she's kind of surrounded by catastrophes when it comes to the Olympics. I mean, you remember that injury in the 200 meters in the Tokyo Games, but she was in the lead here after 5 events, and she had a great chance to increase that in the long jump, as you're looking at there, but she didn't do that well in the long jump. That was the first event this morning. She was still in the lead after that. However, it was followed by one of her weaker events. There were the smiles, but the javelin followed, and although she did well in her event in the javelin, her throw, her big opponent here, Nafi Thiam, the double Olympic champion from Belgium, threw much further, as she was expected to do, and because of that, she has gone into the lead, and it leaves now Katarina Johnson-Thompson having to, as you say, have the run of her life tonight. It's all on the last event tonight, about 7:30, I think, in the 800 metres. It's looking, I've got to be honest, like a silver medal, because she's got to beat her with all the equations, points, you see, that accumulate in this event. She's got to beat her by about 8.5 seconds over 800 metres.
Ouch.
That's roughly 50 metres. So I think she maybe just didn't quite do enough in the long jump this morning, which is a real shame. Thiam's brilliant. She's won the last 2 Olympic titles. Beat Jess Ennis in Rio. But, you know, you never know. I mean, KJT's in much better form than she has been. If she can win tonight, would that be a sensational comeback? It would be a bit like Alex Yee in the men's triathlon. Remember that, if she could come and win it. But, you know, we'll be all screaming at the TV, I'm sure, tonight. But 8 seconds is probably a bit too much to make up. But let's fingers crossed.
That's a lot to hope, isn't it?
It would be, yeah.
And what else is going on tonight? What other events we've got coming up tonight?
Listen, there could be more medals on the. So I think minimum silver for KJT. I think minimum silver as well in the 4x100 meters relay for women. You know, Dina Asher-Smith coming into that. It's a very strong British team. They were, I think, fastest in qualifying. And there are a number of relays tonight. The men could get one as well, 4x4 relays as well. So always strong in the relays. We can update that. So it's now 18 silvers. And
yes, that's chart on the updated chart on our screen.
Yeah, just updated. 53 medals now. So listen, that's right behind France. And when you consider that France have got a much bigger squad than we have in these Olympic Games, we could yet finish the 3rd highest medal haul behind the obvious front 2, the USA and China. So things are looking good. As I say, could be another cycling bronze in the next half hour for Jack Carlin. He's got a ride off. And yeah, more to come, really. The cyclists will deliver more probably over the weekend. And there's more relays, and there's some taekwondo hopes and some pentathlon hopes. We're good at that as well. So all things being equal, it's been another pretty good day. Oh, we haven't mentioned yet Toby Roberts, the climber, the young lad, 19-year-old who won a gold medal this afternoon. How did we miss that one out?
Oh, wow.
It's called the Boulder and Lead. It's one of these new events, a bit like for Tokyo. They brought it in. I don't know why they haven't done it before. It's climbing, speed climbing and endurance climbing. And what they do, I mean, he's literally having to climb a wall and hang on by 2 fingers, which is overhanging on top of you. And he beat a hot favourite from Japan in an incredible performance this afternoon. He's only 19. He took up the sport when he was 12, just after the Rio Games, when it was announced they were going to do this. And in 7 years, he's become Olympic champion. Incredible. Toby Roberts, 19, from Surrey.
Thank you,
and he's the
Chris.
Olympic
Thank
champion.
you so much. That's Chris Scudder with an update on your Olympics for us. Well, we've run out of time, unfortunately, but stay tuned. Dubes & Co is up till next. But before I go, thank you for watching, and here's your weather with Alex Burkill. Have a lovely week.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good afternoon. Here's your Met Office weather for GB News. Whilst there will be a bit of cloud, bit of rain around at times tomorrow, it's looking sunnier and hotter for many on Sunday. But for the time being, it is still quite blustery out there, especially across northern parts. There's quite a pressure gradient with an area of low pressure to the north of the UK, and it's this that's driving some breezy conditions. Also, plenty of showers to end the day across parts of Scotland in particular, and some of them could be quite heavy, but rattling through quite quickly because of those brisk winds. Elsewhere, turning largely dry with some clear skies, especially towards the east overnight, but thicker cloud and a bit of rain pushing in from the west. In the west, then, temperatures holding up mid to possibly high teens for some of us, a little bit fresher.